Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Stephen admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Brianna, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, but Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Stephen didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Brianna. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Brianna was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Stephen time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he found these items in a drawer of Brianna's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, this medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Brianna. Brittany was sure that Stephen was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer that had Brianna's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Stephen might have been involved in Brianna's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Brianna, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Brianna couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Brianna body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone or offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after Brianna's death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna's family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances, including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna's family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the Sheriff's Office and the Coroner's Office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. At the funeral, Stephen did not give a farewell speech to his wife, and he chose to remain silent. Brianna's family observed that he displayed no signs of regret or sadness, appearing completely indifferent. This was surprising, especially considering that only 6 months earlier, he had grieved the loss of a friend for nearly a week, yet the death of his wife seemed to have no effect on him. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sydney Stevens. Pinckneyville, located in the United States, is a small town known for its friendly local community and laid-back lifestyle. It is also a great place for fishing enthusiasts. On July 25, 2010, 2 fishermen were fishing in the near Boku Creek Bridge south of Pinckneyville when they spotted a strange object in the water. Approaching it, they realized it was the body of a girl floating face down. Her right arm was tied with a rope to a concrete block, but the body had risen to the surface due to decomposition and shallow water. The body was in a deteriorated state, making identification difficult. The only clues were a belly piercing and a necklace with a musical note pendant. After checking the information in the database, law enforcement officers discovered that a similar girl had recently disappeared. She was Sydney Stevens, 15, who had gone missing on July 19, 2010, exactly 1 week before body was discovered. Sydney's parents, Tracy and Tim, said she had recently suffered from mental health issues after learning that they had separated shortly before she went missing. She was shocked to learn that Tim, the man who raised her, was not her biological father. This revelation led to a mental disorder and severe depression. She ran away from home multiple times, isolated herself from friends, and even attempted ending her life. To protect her, the family decided to keep her at home under supervision. At this time, she was either cared for by her mother, Tim, or her 17-year-old half-sister, Dakota Wall. The house doors were kept locked, and everything was under control until the morning of July 20th, when her mother found she missing at 6:30 a.m. Tracy suspected something was wrong because Sydney's room was in complete disarray, the dresser was overturned, and belongings were scattered everywhere. She called Dakota, who suggested Sydney had run away again. However, Tracy's concern grew when she saw that Sydney was not logged into social media since the previous evening, which was unusual. Upon inspecting the room, she noticed all of Sydney's personal items were still there, including her purse, phone, shoes, and clothes. It didn't seem like she had run away, it was as if she had left in her pajamas and without shoes. Tracy attempted to locate Sydney but was unsuccessful. Sydney's friends were also unaware of her whereabouts, so Tracy filed a missing Sydney report with the police. The detectives were initially hesitant to take on this case. They knew Sydney had problems, so they thought she just ran away from home again and would come back home later. Therefore, investigators shelved Tracy's testimony and only her relatives and friends participated in the search for her. They searched but in vain. A week later, on July 25, 2010, her body was discovered underwater. Her mother, Tracy, was summoned to the police station to identify her. Tracy immediately recognized her daughter's jewelry and confirmed a belly piercing. Dental records definitively identified the body as Sydney's. Once the body is identified, police need to determine what happened to her. The autopsy revealed shocking details, that is, Sydney was murdered. Forensic experts found evidence of multiple injuries, including gunshot wounds and signs of a violent death. This thing stunned everyone. They could not understand why the suspect could target the young girl in such a brutal way. The day before Sydney disappeared, she had planned to go on a hike with her friends, but her mother did not allow it, which made her very sad. She spent the entire day alone under house arrest. When police investigated the house, they found no signs of a break-in. The doors were always kept closed, suggesting that either a family member let the kidnappers in, or they had a key. The relatives insisted they didn't give keys to any strangers. At the time of the incident, only Tracy and Dakota were in the house. The police began questioning the closest relatives, friends, and Sydney's acquaintance, as those close to the victim are often involved in such crimes. Due to the violent nature of the crime, the investigators suspected a personal motive. Tracy reported coming home around 10 p.m. At that time, Sydney was in one room watching TV. Tracy had taken prescribed medication to sleep in her room. Tim was not home that night. He was on a business trip. The most scrutinized individuals were Sydney's sister, Dakota, and her boyfriend, Chad Bennett, who is 20 years old. They both denied any connection to the crime. Dakota stated that she saw Chad the day before, when he visited her to watch a movie, after which he went to work. Chad confirmed her account. However, detectives were suspicious of Chad because he had a criminal record, which included possession of illegal substances and petty theft. As a result, the police brought in his accomplices for questioning: Carl Dane, 18, James Glazier, 17, and Robbie Mueller, 15. All three were friends with Dakota, the old sister of Sydney. During questioning, the young men were evasive and inconsistent in their statements. Ultimately, they told a similar story but with different details. According to their accounts, on the night of July 19, 2010, Carl, James, and Robbie went to Sydney's house. They had a brutal plan, as part of their group ceremony, which required performing an evil deed. The plan was to kill Sydney's mother, Tracy, without leaving any evidence. However, as they were moving around house, Sydney woke up, stepped into the hallway, and called for her mother. The attackers stopped her in time, preventing her from making any noise. They held her mouth and nose so tightly that she lost consciousness. Then, they decide that killing Sydney is enough for their initiation ceremony and they choose not to harm Tracy. They carried her body to the car, but she regained consciousness. They continued to torture, beat, and strangle her until she passed out again. They then disposed of her by dumping her into the water, tying a concrete block to her body so it would sink and so that no one can find the body. However, this plan backfired because, during decomposition, gases are formed, causing the body to eventually float. All three individuals, Carl, James, and Robbie, were arrested on July 28. Their story seemed highly implausible. They initially intended to kill Tracy, but instead killed Sydney. Something was evidently amiss. The police suspected that, besides this heinous crime, they might have raped she, as her trousers were down when the body was discovered. However, none of the suspects admitted to this act. The body's condition was poor because the water had erased all evidence, so the police can't confirm this. About the lowered trousers, they denied rape, they suggesting it was related to the influence of illegal substances. Law enforcement knew that gangs have a hierarchy and strict discipline. Although Chad, the leader, denied his guilt, it was inevitable that he was involved in this crime. In fact, the attack could only have been carried out with his approval, especially since he could not avoid participating in the initiation everyone was talking about. It was known that Sydney had gunshot wounds, but members of Chad's team chose not to mention it, resulting in their statements being unreliable. Sydney was shot with a .22 caliber pistol. Carl, a member of Chad's group, who had once met Sydney, possessed a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. This weapon was quite costly, and Carl claimed he couldn't afford it, saying Chad had given it to him. Under the pressure of skilled police questioning, members of Chad's team admitted that he directed their actions. They agreed to testify against he, even though he continued to deny any involvement in the crime. Consequently, Chad was also arrested, though the police suspected there were more people involved in Sydney's murder. They believed Dakota might have been part of it, but she continued to deny any involvement, asserting that she loved her sister and they had a good relationship. Detectives continued their investigation after noticing many inconsistencies in the story. When speaking with the Sydney family's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that Dakota actually despised Sydney. She usually tries to join Dakota in group activities, which annoyed the group, especially Dakota. Dakota wants to spend more time with her boyfriend, Chad, instead of with her. However, Dakota was responsible for looking after she while their parents were at work and also have to clean and do other housework. Dakota couldn't get rid of Sydney, so she had to put up with it. At Sydney's funeral, Dakota appeared happy during the service. She smiled casually and chatted cheerfully with everyone who came to pay their respects. She seemed unaffected by her younger sister's passing. Police followed Dakota and they later questioned her for several hours. The detectives intentionally confused her with unexpected questions to catch her in a lie. Eventually, she began to disclose some details. She admitted that during a trip to another city, Nashville, she overheard her friends from the group discussing what had happened. This was on July 21st. Just 2 days after Sydney disappeared. She said 2 members of the group, James and Carl, were talking about the murder. At first, she thought they were referring to someone else since Sydney's body had not yet been found, but then she realized they were speaking about her 15-year-old sister, Sydney. They discussed how they beat, strangled, and drowned Sydney, then tying body to a concrete block. Dakota began her story by explaining that on July 23rd, she was with Chad's group at Carl's house, where she overheard a conversation about the murder. Carl mentioned having a gun and he shot someone with that gun. Under police pressure, Dakota disclosed more details, admitting that she knew who was in the car parked near the house on the night Sydney disappeared. These individuals were members of Chad's group. They entered the house and did something to Sydney. She confessed this to the officer, but explained that she had been too afraid of they to speak up earlier. However, Dakota's account was becoming inconsistent. In her new testimony, she alleged that Carl had threatened her life if she informed the police. The officers noted her lack of emotion and how careful she was in giving her testimony. Investigators knew that she seemed pleased about Sydney's death, casting doubt on her innocence. To probe further, the police pretended to know everything about the crime, including Dakota's relevance, but claimed they were unclear about the motive. This unsettled she, yet she did not confess to any wrongdoing. The case garnered public attention. They intensely discussed the shocking crime. Rumors circulated widely, including one claiming that Dakota discovered Sydney's diary a few days before the crime, revealing that Sydney had slept with her boyfriend, Chad, 2 years earlier. It is important to mention that 2 years earlier, Dakota had not met Chad, yet this might have infuriated her as Sydney's older sister. However, the romantic relationship, especially between Sydney and Chad, was never verified and was doubtful to investigators since Sydney was only 13 at the time. Although this motive wasn't confirmed, there were several other possible reasons for the murder. The following day, Dakota was called in for questioning again. She alleged that her boyfriend, Chad, who was accused of the crime, had shown disturbing behavior. He was aggressive and often lost control, attacking people frequently. It seems that he cannot avoid committing a serious crime. He had a conflict with Sydney's ex-boyfriend, Bubby. According to Chad's testimony, he heard voices urging him to attack his family. He even set their house on fire. He also allegedly shot his favorite cat, hitting it with 15 bullets. None of these claims were verified. Detectives also knew that at 10 p.m. on the night of Sydney's disappearance, Dakota called he. It's believed that the group members arrived at her house then, possibly asking Dakota to open the door or planning something before the attack. Dakota did not answer the police's questions about Sydney's murder, and it seems she is deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. As a result, she was arrested for obstruction of justice. However, at that time, the police did not have enough evidence to proceed with a trial. Chad admitted to being the leader of a gang called the City Saints, whose members followed his orders without question. This thing might have endangered Sydney's life. Chad, however, insisted that he never ordered the murder of Sydney and denied any involvement, even expressing regret over the incident. Meanwhile, Carl participated in interrogations for 2 days as the prosecution prepared for the trial. He recounted that on the night of Sydney's disappearance, he had been drinking at night. Then, Robbie, also drunk, came to see him and suggested going somewhere. Carl agreed without asking for details and to feel secure and took a .22 caliber pistol with him. Carl was very emotional during the interrogation and openly cried. This made the detectives question whether he was an accomplice to a terrible murder or no. It was possible that he went for a walk without knowing Robbie planned to kill Sydney. However, the police were skeptical about his tears, as they could be a sign of remorse or a disguise. Carl stated that they picked up James on the way and drove to the Sydney family's house. Robbie climbed over the fence and entered the house while everyone was asleep and Carl waiting outside in the car. After some time, he became worried because they were taking too long. He claimed he went inside to find his friends and leave together. The door from the courtyard was open, providing direct access to the basement where Sydney lived. The police were suspicious that the door might have been unlocked at night, especially since there were no signs of forced entry. It seemed likely that someone helped the criminals approach Sydney unnoticed. Suspicion falls on her sister, Dakota. Carl explained that when they entered the property, they noticed that Sydney had woken up due to the noise. She recognized both criminals, Robbie and James. She asked what they were doing here. Then, she tried to wake her mother and call for help. However, Robbie attacked she, although she resisted, but they overpowered her. He threw her onto the couch and tied her hands, but she fought back fiercely. He then pointed a gun at her. Likely due to the shock and injuries from the struggle, so she lost consciousness. They were aware of her mental health challenges and her history of running away from home, so they decided to make it look like she had run away again. They removed she from the house through the open door, dragged her to their car, and drove off with her to ensure she wouldn't be found. Halfway through the journey, Sydney regained consciousness and began to resist desperately. Immediately after that, one of the attackers forced her to the ground and strangled her. He kept her in that position for a long time, until she passed out again. They then took she to a river by car, but she regained consciousness again midway. During this time, they claimed that she expressed a desire for intimacy, and they had intimate relations with her. And the strangulation may have been part of a perverted game. Subsequently, Sydney was shot in anger and thrown into the water. However, this testimony of incident was met with disbelief. It was obvious that the intimate intercourse was not of her own volition. Robbie presented a different account to the police. He stated that Carl played a significant role in torturing the girl. Carl had previously been in a brief 3-day relationship with she, but then she broke up with him because he didn't care about her, after which she began seeing someone else. Afterward, he vowed to take revenge on all the girls who betrayed him, starting with Sydney. At that time, no one expected his anger to lead things so far. Robbie, the youngest in the group, at just 15, insisted that he hadn't harmed anyone. As a new member, he simply followed the others and did what they told him, staying within the boundaries of what was allowed. On October 5, 2012, Chad's group members disclosed new information about the case. The police finally gathered enough evidence to build a full case and charge the group members. That day, they questioned Dakota to understand how the door to Sydney's room could have been left open at night. It's known that due to her mental illness, she could pose a danger to herself. Her mother ensured that she couldn't leave by keeping the door always locked. Sydney was under house arrest during all of this. It became evident that the incident was neither accidental nor mistaken because her mother and Dakota were meant to supervise every evening. During questioning, the police were able to get Dakota to confess. She admitted she left the door open, intending to play a prank on her sister, coordinated with members of the group. Finally, the police obtained this long-hidden confession. Later, Dakota disclosed another crucial detail. Before the crime, she had a meeting with Chad's team members, where they discussed their plans. She admitted they intended to kill Sydney. With this information, everything became clear. Even if Dakota didn't directly participate in the murder of Sydney, she was aware of it and did nothing to prevent it. She knew what was going to happen, so leaving the door unlocked wasn't accidental. She planned it to allow the attackers to enter the house and killed Sydney. Investigators believe Dakota underwent a brutal ordeal to join Chad's group, which explained her aided the killers. Her cheerful behavior at her younger sister's funeral was because she completed the ritual to join the group and get rid of her annoying younger sister. Then, their group celebrated after the murder. Carl later acknowledged his guilt, writing an apology letter to Sydney's mother, Tracy, on August 18, 2010. He admitted that he had done evil and now had to pay with his freedom. Even though he knew that it couldn't bring Sydney back to life, but he asked for forgiveness. Tracy read the letter and believed Carl showed no remorse. Although he was arrested early in the investigation, it took 2 years for them to appear in court. Carl Dane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received the 60-year prison sentence. However, before being transferred to a federal prison, he was discovered dead in his cell, with a note expressing regret for his actions. Another member of the group, James, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years. Robbie Mueller initially sentenced to 37 years, but his sentence was reduced to 26 years after an appeal. He will be eligible for parole in late 2023. The gang leader, Chad Bennett, cooperated with investigators and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, resulting in a 20-year sentence. He took a plea deal and will be eligible for parole in 2026. Dakota received a 26-year prison sentence, with the ability to apply for first parole by the end of 2023. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Andrea Del Vesco. Andrea Del Vesco was born in Chicago, USA, in 1994. Her parents, Arthur and Leslie. Her older brother, James, was 2 years old at her birth, and her younger sister, Alexis, was born 4 years later. The family was happy and loving, moving several times before settling in Austin, Texas. Andrea's mother, Leslie, studied financial marketing at Southern Methodist University. She worked for American Airlines and then as a customer service manager in the mortgage division of Citibank. After her family was grown, she quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom. Andrea's father, Arthur, managed the family's assets as the owner of an investment firm. His hard work helped the family become quite wealthy, allowing them to live comfortably. The family's wealth enabled them to send all their children to university. Before that, the children attended a private school with a rigorous academic program taught by the best teachers in the state. From an early age, they engaged in a wide range of activities, from sports to religion, which helped instill high moral values in them. Andrea excelled academically, played sports, and developed in a well-rounded manner. She loved visiting museums and learning about art. She is kind and caring towards those around her. She has a particularly close relationship with her mother. From a young age, Andrea and her family traveled a lot, which broadened her horizons and exposed her to many different people and cultures. As she grew up, Andrea became her parents' hope and pride. In 2012, after finishing school, she applied to several educational institutions simultaneously. Her parents hoped she would attend the University of Chicago, where her older brother was studying, and for a while, Andrea preferred this option too. However, she decided to wait until she received responses from all the schools she applied to before making a decision. Ultimately, she chose the psychology department at the University of California, Los Angeles. By 2022, this university was ranked among the best in America. It has always been highly regarded and prestigious, with highly qualified teachers and a strong scientific and technical foundation. This choice reassured her family. Andrea then moved to Los Angeles to attend school. Her parents were happy with her decision and supported her choice, although they were worried that she would be too far away. Her brother would no longer be able to take care of her. With the support of her family, she began her new life. Upon arrival, Andrea needed to choose a club to join, which helped her develop lasting friendships and gain support from more experienced students. To become a full member, one usually needed to pass a test and make a small donation. The student community was very close-knit, with many students living so openly that they left their doors unlocked, allowing them to visit each other freely. Although it was generally safe, incidents could still occur. Andrea happily joined the club. She had a great sense of humor, was good-looking, and dressed well. Her impeccable style made her popular. She also created many extravagant outfits that amazed everyone. Andrea was the center of attention at any party. However, she balanced her social life with her studies. After completing her freshman year, she got a job as a paralegal at a law firm in Brentwood, handling administrative tasks. This job did not fit her schedule, so she found a new part-time job. She kept changing jobs to better balance her work and studies, allowing her to have pocket money and not have to depend on her parents. Andrea continued her student life until she graduated in 2015. She always dreamed of traveling after finishing her studies. As her senior year approached, she lived in a dormitory just 5 minutes away from the main university building. This dorm is a great place for students, hosting many sorority parties and university events. Andrea shares her living space with her sorority friends and a small dog she adopted from a rescue. She loves her pet so much that she even has a social media page dedicated to posting cute pictures of it. One day, the dog goes missing, leaving Andrea devastated as she searches frantically for it. Luckily, her beloved dog is found 5 days later. In September, Andrea is preparing to start her senior year of college, with classes scheduled to begin on September 24th. However, the fall semester officially starts on the 21st. On the 19th, she shares one of her favorite music videos on her social media page. The very next day, September 20th, 2015, is the last day before the girls in the club return to school. Everyone was having fun on the balcony of the apartment building. Andrea was at a club activity until 3 in the morning with her friend Jessica. Jessica then went to her bedroom around 3:30 and went to sleep, while Andrea lay on the couch in the living room. However, Andrea could not sleep that night. A few hours later, Samantha, another neighbor, came running to Andrea's door, screaming about a fire. Andrea's door was closed, which was unusual because she always left her room open for her friends in the club. Samantha tried to open the door but couldn't, so she called the other girls to help. Together, with great difficulty, they managed to open the door and found the room filled with smoke and fire. They found Andrea lying motionless on the bed but could not call her because of the danger. Realizing that they could not safely enter the room, the girls evacuated and called 9 people at a time. They waited on the sidewalk for help. Later, the fire truck arrived at the scene. Firefighters quickly used hoses to extinguish the fire on the second floor. A total of 32 firefighters worked to effectively extinguish the fire. After the incident, rumors spread among the students that Andrea was dead, as she had not escaped the building and was not seen. When the firefighters finally entered the room, they found the body of a woman lying on her bed. During the investigation, the police determined that the fire started in Andrea's bedroom. At the scene, the police were unable to identify the deceased because her face was disfigured by the fire. They were only able to confirm that it was a female body. Fingerprints could not be taken because her hands were too badly burned. Surprisingly, the girl's small dog was found by firefighters. The dog was severely burned, barely breathing at the feet of its owner. However, it was later decided to euthanize the dog to reduce its suffering. After the incident, the dormitory students were relocated to different housing while repairs started on the burned building. The girls were frightened, leading the university to enhance campus security. Everyone believed that Andrea was the victim of the fire since all other students were confirmed safe during roll call. They reported seeing Andrea lying on her bed in the room that was on fire and were puzzled as to why she did not get up and leave. They found it odd and speculated that she might have lost consciousness, suffocated from carbon monoxide, or had already died. Andrea's parents returned to Austin from a long trip, unaware of what had happened to their daughter. They began to worry when Andrea did not reach out to them, and their attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned, her mother called one of their neighbors and learned about the fire, which might have involved Andrea. However, the police had not yet confirmed the identity of the body found at the scene. The entire family gathered to pray for Andrea's safety and traveled to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, police began investigating the case. They discovered that Jessica, Andrea's neighbor, was the last person to communicate with her before the tragedy. Police planned to interview Jessica to gather details about their last conversation, hoping she might have witnessed something important. Police interviewed Jessica to learn how the fire started, but her answers were not helpful. She quickly stated that she saw nothing and had no idea what caused the fire. Friends from the sisterhood, who also spoke with the police, suggested that Andrea may have accidentally fallen asleep with an aromatic candle still lit. They were convinced that the fire was not set intentionally, as Andrea had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. To verify this theory, a detailed examination of the incident scene was needed. Initially, they inspected electrical appliances and outlets for any short circuits, but everything appeared to be in order. No candles were found at the scene, and the only item that raised suspicion was the trash can located at the head of the bed. Experienced firefighters speculated that this could be the starting point of the fire. However, friends and members of the sisterhood confirmed that Andrea never slept near the trash can, which was typically placed at the opposite end of the room. Unfortunately, the contents of the can could not be identified without a detailed chemical analysis, as everything was completely destroyed. Forensic experts specializing in arson were called in to investigate. 2 hours after the fire was put out, police were convinced that it was not accidental. The critical piece of evidence was a metal trash can, which someone could have used to pour flammable liquid and ignite a fire. The flames originated near the head of the girl's bed and spread throughout the room. Forensic experts confirmed their suspicions when it was clear that the fire was intentionally set. The investigation at the crime scene intensified. Forensic experts found a large number of traces of blood splashes on the bed and around it, with most of the stains surviving the fire. Police were concerned when neighbors reported trying to call the Andrea as they entered her room at the start of the fire, but she did not respond and was found lying motionless. They feared she was already dead and suspected that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. By this time, the police had already pieced together a rough timeline of the events from that tragic evening. They interviewed many students, focusing mainly on the roommates. According to the roommates, a group of girls had been chatting on the balcony before entering the apartment building. The last confirmed sighting of Andrea alive was at 5:50 a.m. Samantha, her roommate, was preparing for work on campus and saw that Andrea was sleeping on the couch in the living room at that time. Samantha left for work and returned around 6:30 a.m., but Andrea was no longer on the couch. She had gone to her room, but this time her door was closed, which was unusual for her. This behavior struck Samantha as odd, and she wondered why Andrea had suddenly gone to her room and shut the door, especially after being fast asleep before. Feeling concerned, Samantha noted this difference when she then saw the fire. While talking to other students in the dorm, the police discovered a significant clue. A girl named Sarah returned to her room around 5:30 a.m. after dropping her boyfriend off at the airport. Her apartment was directly above Andrea's room. Since it was still dark at that hour, Sarah noticed a male figure as she tried to open her front door. The building was for women, but it wasn't unusual for guys to visit their girlfriends, so she didn't think much of it at first. However, she became alarmed when the man immediately ran away upon seeing her, as if he was trying to hide. This frightened and confused her. She described the man as wearing a black baseball cap, a black and white t-shirt, and dark jeans. Feeling scared, Sarah hurried into her room and locked the door. Once inside, she quickly texted her boyfriend to tell him about the suspicious man she had seen. Unsure whether he posed a threat or if she should contact the police, she shared her concerns. Her boyfriend reassured her that it was likely just someone visiting, suggesting there was no need to panic. Later Sarah went to bed, but around 6:15, she was awakened by a woman's scream and the frantic barking of a dog from the room below her, where Andrea lived. This startled her, especially since the dog had never barked before and usually stayed calm. She realized something was wrong downstairs. Sarah tried to reach Andrea to check on her, but couldn't get in touch. She called 911, but the emergency services didn't take her seriously because the area was known for its student parties and noise. Still, a patrol car was dispatched to the dormitory. The police arrived around 6:23 but left a few minutes later without updating Sarah on their findings. They reported seeing nothing unusual, no person, no barking dog, and no screams. They only shined their flashlights into Andrea's room from the street without conducting a thorough investigation. Believing that someone might have had too much to drink or had an argument that upset the dog, the police decided to leave. Meanwhile, Sarah was watching from the window and tried calling Andrea, but no one answered. She also tried to contact the other girls in the building, but it seemed that everyone was asleep. After the police left, she heard a loud bang at around 6:45 a.m. Sarah rushed to the balcony and looked down, seeing thick smoke rising. She also spotted a stranger in a black and white t-shirt jumping from the balcony below. Panicking, Sarah feared that the man had harmed Andrea. She quickly grabbed her phone and called 911 to report the situation, then ran downstairs, where other students had gathered near Andrea's room, trying to open the door. Sarah quickly left the building to chase the intruder. She spotted him and ran after him down the street, but he escaped by getting into a red Nissan and driving away. Sarah recalled a detail on the car window that had a fraternity sticker. Meanwhile, Andrea's friends had made it into her room. They called out to her, but there was no response. The students claimed they saw her lying motionless on her bed, surrounded by flames. Several girls noticed blood on her neck, chest, and shoulders. In a panic, the friends left the burning house and saw the red Nissan speeding away, with Sarah in pursuit. However, none of Andrea's friends could identify anyone who might have wanted to harm her. All of her friends had cared for her, and at the time of her death, she was not in a romantic relationship. The investigation looked into the possibility of a robbery, but nothing was stolen from Andrea's room. It is thought that Andrea may have met someone on Tinder and the date did not go well. But this has not been confirmed as there are no leads. The police reviewed the surveillance footage from the campus, but it was unhelpful because of its poor quality. They searched all nearby streets for a red Nissan car with a fraternity sticker that had been spotted near the crime scene. Police interviewed all the students, focusing on fraternity members and residents of nearby homes. Nicholas and Mohair later reported a burglary, claiming that their laptops and speakers had been stolen, and one of them said that the keys to his red Nissan were also missing. This occurred on the same evening as Andrea's murder. A few days after the fire, police officially identified the charred remains as belonging to 21-year-old Andrea Delvesco, using dental records provided by her family. An autopsy conducted on September 22 indicated that she was wearing only a sports bra at the time of her death, which raised suspicions of rape, although this could not be confirmed due to the condition of her body. Most of her hair had been burned away, and there was significant blood loss, particularly from the back of her head. Approximately 90% of her body was burned. Forensic experts found multiple fatal stab wounds on Andrea's body, mainly to her head and neck. She had 5 stab wounds on the right side of her neck and 2 on the left, for a total of 19 stab wounds. The lack of soot and carbon monoxide in her body suggests that Andrea was dead before the fire started. This suggests that the fire was an attempt to cover up the crime rather than the cause of death. As a result, the investigation was upgraded to a murder case, creating a sense of fear across the campus. On the day the official forensic report was made public, police traced a stolen laptop and speakers to a man named Joseph in Fresno, California, which is over 3 hours from the crime scene. Police quickly going to his address. When police met Joseph, he claimed that he had borrowed the speakers from his roommate and that he had done nothing wrong. The situation became more complicated when the stolen items were passed around. His friend was Alberto Medina. Alberto claimed that he had lent the items to Joseph, explaining that his friends, who were moving out, had given them to him for safekeeping. However, Alberto then disappeared. Police began searching for Alberto on September 24. He was arrested 2 days later and brought in for questioning. Alberto's testimony was inconsistent. He said that on September 18, he went to the University of California with his friend Eric Marquez. They spent the week together, attending a Chris Brown concert and then going to a party with friends who had laptops and speakers. Under pressure from police, Alberto eventually confessed that he had stolen the items from random people while intoxicated and unaware of his actions, and returned home around 5:30 a.m. The police noted that the fire had not started at that time. When questioned about a suspicious stranger, Alberto unexpectedly claimed he was attacked by someone with a gun while they were returning with the stolen items. The attacker fired at them but missed, allowing them to escape. Alberto described the attacker as wearing dark jeans and a black and white t-shirt, matching the description Sarah had previously given. However, the police still expressed doubts about Alberto's story. Alberto suddenly remembered that his friend Eric had visited Andrea, a beautiful blonde woman he met at a party that same weekend. Eric planned to be intimate with her. When Eric returns to the apartment, he acts strange and nervous. Eric says he hit her, and urges Alberto to leave quickly. Alberto's account implicates Eric in Andrea's murder. 5 days after the murder, the police interviewed a new suspect named Eric Marquez. He was 22 years old and a fifth-year medical student at the university. Eric had no previous legal problems and was viewed as a good person. His friend Alberto pointed the police to his home, which was only a 5-minute walk from the crime scene. However, getting Eric to confess was challenging. He stated that he spent the entire weekend drinking at home and hardly went out. Alberto and Eric's testimony was confirmed by surveillance camera footage from their home. When the footage was reviewed, both Eric and Alberto were active from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m., frequently wandering the streets. Alberto was wearing a black and white t-shirt and dark jeans. At 4 a.m., Alberto and Eric left the house for an extended period of time. Alberto was easily recognized by the distinctive tattoos on his arms. A key moment in the footage is Alberto returning to the apartment at around 7:11 a.m., with Andrea's red blanket wrapped around him. This corresponds to the time of the arson. Additionally, a red Nissan, matching Sarah's description, was spotted on video. By 7:30 a.m., Alberto and Eric were seen leaving the house again to throw away some trash. At this time, Alberto was shirtless and Eric had changed his clothing. While the cameras captured this evidence, Eric insisted he could not remember anything. Police obtained a search warrant for Alberto and Eric's apartment. A thorough inspection revealed that Alberto had suffered abrasions to his hands, while Eric had no similar injuries. Police found the red Nissan, which had blood on the steering wheel, dashboard, and driver's door, along with trash and a black sock inside. In the apartment's closet, police discovered a trash bag filled with bloody clothing, Andrea's underwear, and a black sock that matched the sock found in the car, a bloody knife, and a blanket missing from Andrea's room. After conducting the inspection, police gathered enough evidence to formally charge Alberto and Eric. On September 28, Alberto and Eric were charged with murder and burglary, and Albert was additionally charged with arson. Despite the threat of the death penalty, both pleaded not guilty. Their families insisted on a thorough, independent investigation, unable to accept that their son could have committed such a heinous act. Police later interviewed Joseph Garcia, who was found using a stolen laptop and speakers. He claimed that he had witnessed Alberto and Eric returning home that evening. Alberto had confided in him about the incident at the dormitory. He had entered Andrea's room after watching her while she walked her dog, then snuck inside. Alberto took a knife from the kitchen, forced Andrea into the room, and locked the door. He raped her, and when she screamed and fought back, he stabbed her to death and burned the house to cover up his crime. Alberto threatened Joseph to keep quiet. An expert found DNA evidence that showed blood on the suspect's clothes and car matched Andrea's DNA. Additionally, a witness named Julio, a cleaner, observed Alberto getting out of his car and walking toward Andrea's dorm. Julio noted that Alberto had a large tattoo on his arm and was wearing a black and white t-shirt. Alberto and Eric both appeared drunk and said they needed to go to Andrea's room because she needed help. Police determined that Alberto had entered the building while Eric was still in the car, so the blood was only found on the driver's side. Andrea's family was outraged by the police's inaction when Sarah first raised her concerns. The officers neglected to check Andrea's room, the likely scene of the crime. The Los Angeles Police Department announced that the officers involved have been suspended and an internal investigation has been launched to look into their negligence in responding to a call from the victim's friend, Sarah. The findings of that investigation have been submitted to the court. Although the officers were acquitted but were still fired. In the fall of 2016, Eric went on trial for his role in Andrea's murder, along with charges of robbery and arson. Eric and Alberto were charged with animal cruelty due to the injuries Andrea's dog suffered in the fire. In September 2017, the possibility of the death penalty was considered for Alberto. His attorneys urged him to accept a plea deal to receive a lighter sentence and avoid the death penalty, but he refused. As a result, the case was split into two separate trials. Eric was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to accessory and abetting. It was determined that he did not participate in the murder or arson. He remained in the car throughout the incident. Alberto Medina's trial began on May 15, 2018. He faced a jury on 5 different charges. Despite this, Alberto chose not to accept the plea deal offered by the prosecution. On May 24, 2018, after extensive deliberation, Alberto pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, arson, animal cruelty, and burglary. The judge decided against the death penalty, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, the court imposed another 12 years for other charges. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Maria Kitabi. In 2003, Dr. Paul Jarrett was 82 years old. Despite his age, he remained strong and healthy. He was a respected psychiatry professor, well known in the area. From a young age, he aspired to succeed in this field. He pursued education, secured a job at a clinic, and eventually, after gaining experience, opened his own practice. His successful career allowed him to buy his dream house and enjoy a comfortable life for many years. Paul lived there with his wife and their 4 children, Paul Jr., Greg, Aletta, and Mark. Together, they built a happy life into their later years. In 2002, the family faced a tragedy when his beloved wife passed away. It was a significant loss for Paul, but he persevered. He planned to continue working at his clinic as long as he was able. His calm and balanced personality drew people to him. By 2003, Paul was still running his private practice and had a close relationship with his youngest son, Greg. Greg visits and takes care of him often. They go fishing and run marathons together. Greg followed in his father's footsteps and became a doctor. He was working at a hospital in Miami while also pursuing further medical education. Before he moved to live with his father, Greg married his assistant at the clinic, and they had a child together. However, his marriage did not last. A few years after their child's birth, he divorced his wife and returned to care for his father, who required support and attention. Although Greg's father was cheerful and desired an active life, he needed assistance in his old age, and Greg was willing to help him. On July 16, 2003, Greg did not show up for work. He was expected at the hospital by 7 a.m. to work until 3:30 p.m., but even by 7:30 a.m., he still hadn't arrived. This concerned his colleagues since he was known for his punctuality and responsibility. They attempted to contact him by phone, but he did not answer. At that time, Greg was dating a nurse named Monica. His colleagues reached out to her to find out about Greg's whereabouts, but she informed them that she had not seen him since the previous evening when he left to go home and take care of his father. They attempted to call Paul, the father of the missing doctor, but he didn't answer his phone. Next, they contacted the Paul workplace, where his assistant informed them that Paul hadn't shown up there either. She didn't know his whereabouts and mentioned that her calls to him were also unanswered. This situation was increasingly worrying. Concerned, Monica decided to visit Paul's home to investigate further, fearing that, given his age, he might have had an accident and could require assistance. When she got to the house, she immediately saw that Paul's car was gone from the driveway. There were no other signs of alarm. She knocked on the door, but it was locked. Monica walked inside. The house was messy and quiet. Feeling uneasy and afraid that there might be a robber inside, she did not dare to go any further. She called 911 to report Paul missing. The dispatcher found the situation suspicious, suspecting that a crime might be committed. Monica agreed and decided to wait for the police to arrive. When the officers arrived, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside, they found Paul Jarrett lying lifeless on the floor, having been shot in the head. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting he was likely shot while asleep and died instantly. During their initial inspection, officers noticed black spots around the gunshot wounds and on the bed linen, indicating traces of gunpowder gases that had burned his skin. It was clear that the attacker was very close to Paul when he was shot. In the next room, Greg was found, and his death was far from peaceful. The noise of the shooting likely woke him up. He got up to investigate and encountered the attacker. There were probably 2 criminals involved. Greg was shot 4 times. He attempted to defend himself, first attacking the shooter but was immediately wounded in the arms. Realizing he was outmatched, he tried to escape, prompting the criminal to shoot wildly. The police found several bullet holes in the walls. Furniture in the rooms was overturned, and items from shelves were scattered on the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. Typically, thieves target houses when the owners are absent, but sometimes they encounter them. If the criminals have a weapon, they might use it to eliminate unwanted witnesses. However, in this case, the victims were intentionally targeted. Paul was clearly killed in his sleep and never saw the criminals' faces, posing no threat to them. Greg was also asleep during the invasion, and if the intruders hadn't made noise with gunfire, he wouldn't have been a problem for them. Robbers do not usually act this way. They only open fire if the homeowner spots them during the robbery and recognizes them. The police soon realized that the attackers had come with the intention of killing, and that the rearrangement of the furniture was just a setup to throw the investigation off track. Furthermore, the locks showed no signs of damage, suggesting that the perpetrator knew the victims, either breaking into the house or being let in voluntarily. The presence of numerous visible valuables and cash left untouched in the house suggested it wasn't a typical robbery, as a real thief would have likely taken them. It's possible the criminal was targeting specific valuables, but that's just speculation. Many neighbors later described the area as peaceful, safe, and where incidents were rare. The deceased had good relationships with neighbors and apparently had no enemies. Typically, Paul, like many residents, didn't lock his doors, trusting those around him as friends, not foes. Paul was well liked by his neighbors and was a respected physician. Police could not determine a specific motive for the crime. Strangely, Paul's car was missing, as was a gun in Greg's safe. Greg had a weapon for self-defense, but ballistics tests showed that the men had been shot with different guns. None of the neighbors heard the gunshots, which was highly unusual, suggesting the use of a silencer. Although there were several small houses near the Paul house, no one saw anything unusual. Forensic experts had not found any useful evidence in the house. Paul's car was found about 20 kilometers from the crime scene. The car was reported missing. The doctor's car was left in a parking lot near a dry cleaners, with the doors unlocked and the keys still in the ignition, as if the criminal had expected it to be stolen. Fortunately, police found the car. After a thorough examination, forensic scientists could not find any DNA or fingerprints inside. The criminal wore gloves or wiped away any traces. There was nothing in the surveillance footage. The killer acted professionally and avoided being caught on camera. With no leads, the police were left with limited resources. The police had nothing left but to start checking the immediate surroundings of the doctors in search of suspects. The first person they focused on was Monica, who had called 911. Although she had done the right thing by notifying the police and not entering the house herself, police questioned whether she knew what she would find inside and deliberately avoided going inside. After reviewing the evidence, they determined that Monica had no motive for Greg and Paul's deaths and had actually suffered a loss because she and Greg are dating and are getting ready to get married. and Monica had a verified alibi and were eliminated as suspects. Likewise, Greg's ex-wife also had an alibi and was not considered a suspect. The investigation then focused on his father, Paul Jareth, a renowned psychiatrist. Although he could have difficult clients, and everyone was in a bad mood from time to time, people with problems could easily be hurt, leading to resentment. However, Dr. Paul's practice was impeccable. He was highly regarded by his colleagues and patients, and no dissatisfied clients were found. While police were investigating various leads, searches continued at the victims' homes. A forensic scientist found a letter from a credit union addressed to Paul, sent shortly before his death. The letter alerted him to some suspicious transactions on his bank account, which caught the attention of the police. They discovered that access to Paul's account had been granted to his trusted assistant Maria Katabi. This raised suspicions about her potential involvement in the tragedy. Police learned that Maria had repeatedly attempted to cash counterfeit checks at banks, involving the embezzlement of tens of thousands of dollars. However, despite her persistence, the credit union did not approve the fraudulent transactions. Maria had no problem with her salary. She earned a lot of money and Paul appreciated her work. However, it appeared that she had been stealing money from him, which was discovered by a strange coincidence. Just a few days later, Paul was found dead in his home, making it seem as if Maria had a strong motive for the crime. Maria therefore became the prime suspect. She was summoned to the police station to discuss the use of her boss's money. Maria denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that there was no reason to kill Paul as they had long since settled all their financial issues. A reliable employee reported that Paul caught Maria writing several counterfeit checks. She was struggling financially and had informed her boss about these issues. The assistant felt that resorting to illegal actions was her only option. Paul and Maria had worked together for many years, and he had grown very fond of her, trusting her completely. As a result, according to Maria, he forgave her financial fraud, and they continued to work together. Maria indeed had confirmed financial troubles, including tax issues and to her property. She was going through a divorce. Given these problems, Paul felt sympathetic towards her and did not plan to terminate her employment. During the investigation, it was found that Maria had stolen $100,000 from Paul. He trusted her so much that he didn't scrutinize her financial dealings. The last transaction she made was for $9,000. It was not possible to prove any involvement of the Maria in what happened. Maria had no other motive for any criminal acts and had a confirmed alibi for the incident, as did other possible suspects. Ultimately, the police reached a dead end and had to remove Maria from the suspect list. For many months, the case made no progress. Police repeatedly reviewed all the evidence but found no clues. Maria was the only possible motive, but her alibi excluded her as a suspect. Ultimately, police was waiting for the attacker to slip up in some way. They needed something concrete, like a murder weapon. The only forensic evidence was a few shell casings. Police hoped the killer would use their weapon again, making it possible to catch them. However, if the criminal was clever, they likely disposed of the gun used in the double murder. In such a case, police needed to wait for them to use a stolen gun. They constantly monitored news reports, focusing on gun-related crimes. The strategy was clear, all they could do was wait. The toughest time was for Alette Jareth, the daughter of the Paul. For months after her father and brother were shot, she returned to their home. In the Paul family, she was left alone. Paul and Greg were gone. Alette, grieving and alone, came to a house where she had lost her loved ones, an older brother who was killed, another family member who died after stopping NMI substances, and a third who died in a car accident. She didn't intend to stay long in the house, as its gloomy atmosphere was overwhelming. Her goal was to create a memorial video and gather the belongings of her relatives because the house was scheduled for demolition. Alette began recording, wanting to walk through the rooms one last time to remember the happy years when her loved ones were still alive. It reminded her of the day Paul died. She walked through the rooms, collecting items that were precious to her and had been left untouched for months. Among these was her father's jacket. While checking the pockets, she discovered a letter from her father's assistant, Maria Katabi. In the letter, Maria apologized profusely to her boss and elaborated on her family issues, struggles with redeeming the house, and tax debts. She confessed to embezzlement and promised to return the money once her problems were resolved. Alette turned to the police for help. They had several questions about the letter. They wondered why Maria wrote an apology letter if she claimed she and Paul were involved. It was clear she was lying about the boss knowing about her financial fraud. During the first interrogation, Maria didn't mention the letter, so the police asked her to come to the station again to explain. Maria, a trusted employee, admitted she had forgotten about the note. She explained that she was initially afraid to admit the embezzlement, fearing the boss would fire her. So, she decided to write a confession letter first and then speak to him in person. Maria left the note on her boss's desk at the end of the workday when he was gone but planned to retrieve it the next morning, as she had changed her mind and wanted to discuss the matter face to face. Unfortunately, the note was no longer on the desk the following morning, indicating that Paul had already taken it. In any case, she spoke with her boss, and they came to an agreement on repaying the debt. Maria's story seemed unconvincing, especially since the police had already caught her lying, which made them suspect her involvement in the case once more. However, there was no concrete evidence proving her guilt. 8 months after the murder, there was a real breakthrough in the investigation. A man was arrested for an unrelated crime. The most interesting thing is that he used similar firearms, a .22 caliber pistol. After checking, it turned out that his shells were identical to those found in the house of the Paul Jarrett. Meanwhile, a confidential informant tipped off the police about a planned armored car robbery. The criminals intended to recruit someone among the security guards to carry out their plan, which involved killing the other guards and stealing the cash transport. However, the security guard approached by the criminals decided to outsmart them. He informed the police of their plan, which led to the successful capture of the suspects. The individuals were identified as Jose Barca and Ruben Fernandez. Notably, one of them possessed the same pistol used in the shootings of Paul and Greg. Furthermore, a pistol stolen from the Paul residence was also found in their possession, eliminating any possibility of coincidence. This evidence confirmed their involvement in the double murder. The reason why no neighbors heard gunshots during the attack became apparent. The perpetrators had used silencers on their guns. During the interrogation, the police discovered that they had another accomplice, Juan Carlos Fernandez. He admitted to knowing Maria Katabi, with whom he had a romantic relationship that Maria had hidden from the police. Juan confessed that Maria had asked him to break into her boss Paul's house to retrieve a letter. Maria had previously stolen money from Paul and had written a confession of embezzlement, which she left on Paul's desk. She later regretted this but was too scared to ask the doctor to return the letter. Maria wanted to destroy the letter but had no chance, so she begged Juan to help her get it back. The consequences could have been serious, potentially costing her both her job and her freedom if her boss contacted the police. Not wanting to go to jail, Maria asked her boyfriend to help her steal the letter. Juan agreed and asked his brother Ruben and his friend Jose to do the job. Maria gave them information about the house. All she asked for was a letter admitting her embezzlement. She did not kill them. She also said that Paul's house rarely locked its front door, so gaining access to the house was not a problem, allowing the criminals to easily break in. However, they did not know where to find a small note in such a large house. Realizing that this might wake the homeowner, they decided that they would kill them first and then search the house without getting caught. So that is what they did. They shot Paul first, then his son Greg. Surprisingly, even after searching the entire house, they could not find the note they were looking for. The robbers then left, taking the gun with them. Despite a thorough police search, the note was never found. Paul's attentive daughter accidentally discovered this crucial piece of evidence. All 3 accomplices involved in Greg's shooting were arrested. They attempted to prove their innocence in the murders of the doctors. Jose Barca was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Juan Carlos's trial took much longer than those of the other defendants. He underwent mental evaluations and claimed he was not aware of the true nature of events. He had been struggling with significant mental health issues for many years, casting doubt on his ability to perceive reality accurately. It was known that he had suffered a serious head injury, which was exacerbated by a fall from a great height, worsening his mental problems. This was the main cause of the incident. Questions quickly arose as to whether one knew renowned psychiatrist Paul Jarrett and had a grudge against him, which could have been the real motive for the crime. However, these speculations could not be confirmed. In the end, Juan still had to stand trial. In 2016, nearly 13 years after the crime, he confessed to the murders of Paul Jarrett and Greg. He apologized to the victims' families and asked them to pray for him in the name of Christ. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His brother, Ruben Fernandez, also admitted to being an accomplice in the robbery because he was the driver. Ruben said he did not know about Juan and Jose's murderous intentions. They had originally come to the house to retrieve a letter. When the shooting began, Ruben feared that the homeowner was shooting at the robbers. So he fled the scene. As a result, he was sentenced to 7 years of probation. This light sentence was due to a lack of evidence linking him to the murders. Maria Katabi was arrested and had to stand trial. She had a troubled past, but things seemed to improve when she got a job at Floridrot. She was desperate to find the letter, as losing it could endanger her life and job security. Maria had no previous convictions, so her lawyer was optimistic about securing a suspended sentence. Maria Katabi went to trial. The prosecution insisted on a harsh sentence for the double murder, arguing that she had orchestrated the crime by directing the perpetrators to Paul's home. If Maria had not tried to find the letter she had written and given to Paul, it is possible that both victims would still be alive. The prosecutor's office needed evidence. In the meantime, Maria was in jail and talking to another inmate. During one conversation, Maria made a surprising confession to the inmate. She revealed that the doctor had no intention of firing her or contacting the police, he just wanted his money back. However, Maria was broke and in danger of losing her home due to mounting debt. She had no intention of returning the stolen money. As a trusted employee, she knew the doctor well and knew about the valuables in his home, which she saw as an opportunity to make more money. Maria staged the robbery and implicated her boyfriend to avoid incriminating herself and reduce her sentence. The lawyer insisted that Maria could not be charged with double murder. She didn't shoot the victims, didn't plan the murders, and never even entered their house. The defense argued that Maria's primary target was the note, which could be crucial to serious legal charges, not murder. It was reasonable for her to get rid of such potentially damaging evidence. In her statement, Maria repeated her testimony. She gave the doctor the note with the plan to retrieve it the next day and discuss it directly with her boss. However, when she returned, the note was gone from the table. The woman admitted that she had lured her boyfriend and his friends into the robbery, not knowing that they were dangerous and potentially violent. During the trial, Maria tearfully shared tragic episodes in her life. She testified that she had been raped when she was 18 and had suffered abuse from her abusive father. She was regularly beaten by her husband after that. She hoped to escape this vicious cycle of abuse with her boss's money, but that plan failed. The jury found Maria Katabi not guilty of double murder, but guilty of armed robbery, and sentenced her to 30 years in prison. During the trial, Alette stated that she had let go of her anger and hostility toward the defendants. Instead, she chose to focus on the good memories of her loved ones and seek justice. Alette now plans to honor Juan Carlos' request by praying for him. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Roxana Sikorsky. Lorraine and Jeffrey Sikorsky were a happy married couple, they living in a beautiful dream home in a prosperous small town in Michigan, which had a population of under 10,000. Lorraine worked as a nurse, while Jeffrey was an engineer. They have successful careers and good incomes, however, they feel deprived without children. Both Lorraine and Jeffrey deeply wanted to become parents. They often found themselves enviously watching their neighbors' children go to school, realizing that they were missing the joy of parenthood. In 2004, after careful consideration, they decided to adopt their child. However, they quickly realized that adoption was difficult and had many hurdles. In search of a solution, some friends suggested a simpler option: travel to Poland to adopt there. Then, they contacted an orphanage, received approval to adopt, and traveled to Poland to select a child. They even thought about adopting more than one child. Lorraine was particularly drawn to a 4-year-old girl named Roxana, she feeling a strong emotional bond with her. As they talked, Roxana began to call Lorraine Mom, which filled Lorraine with joy. Feel secure about your choice. Jeffrey also liked Roxana and supported the decision. Lorraine and Jeffrey discovered that Roxana had a younger brother and sister who lived in the same orphanage. The siblings had been removed from an unstable family and were very close to one another, with Roxana taking care of them as the oldest. Lorraine and Jeffrey decided to adopt all 3 children together so they wouldn't be separated. They believed it was important for the siblings to grow up together. Excited to return home, they envisioned their new life as a big, happy family filled with the sounds of children laughing. Their dream became a reality when they completed all the necessary paperwork and returned home with their 3 new children. Lorraine and Jeffrey's 3 adopted children quickly adapted and settled into their new life. Their children find studying English very easy. Jeffrey continued working, while Lorraine took a break from her job to care for the home and children. Then, children started school and had no difficulties with their studies. The family was attached and happy for 10 years, until Roxana entered her teenage years. In 2014, at 15, Roxana started having behavioral issues. She rebelled, spent all day playing computer games, do poorly in school, and stopped listening to her parents. Worried about Roxana's behavior, Lorraine and Jeffrey reached out to a psychologist for help. Roxana was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. She received medication and was later diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which stemmed from neglect and abuse in her childhood. This disorder affects a child's ability to form an emotional relationship with a foster parent and can lead to fear, hypervigilance, difficulty interacting with peers, and exhibit aggressive behavior towards self and others. Therapy had a positive impact on Roxana, helping her feel calmer. However, her life took a turn when a guy named Michael Angelo Rivera reached out to her on social media, claiming to be 18 years old. Roxana was thrilled to receive attention from him. Michael, a high school student, who was 4 years older than Roxana, began chatting with she. He praised her, making her feel comfortable and special. She shared her story of being adopted, and the difficulties she had faced, and Michael listened empathetically, making her feel understood. One day, Michael invited Roxana to meet him, and she accepted. She dyed her hair, got dressed, and headed to the library to meet him. Roxana was petite and weighed only 40 kilograms, which made her seem fragile. Michael was captivated by her. Their meeting went well, and from then on, they started seeing each other at the library every day. Her parents were unaware that she was talking to Michael. They believed she was only going to the library to study and that her meetings with Michael were just coincidental. Later on, it was revealed that Michael was actually 23 years old, not 18 years old like he said, making him 8 years older than Roxana. Despite this age difference, Roxana was so blindly in love with him that she didn't even realize it. This was her first love, and she was already fantasizing about marrying Michael to escape her parents' disapproval, hoping they could live happily together. Roxana had difficulty bonding with her adoptive parents because of her mental illness, reactive attachment disorder. Although her parents cared for her, but she quickly became more deeply attached to Michael. To outsiders, their relationship appeared unhealthy. Her friends warned her against dating Michael because he appeared much older, but Roxana dismissed their concerns, thinking they were just jealous since they didn't have boyfriends. As a result, Roxana started to pull away from her friends and family, spending all her time with Michael. She was often with him and rarely came home. Her parents, Lorraine and Jeffrey, noticed her changed behavior and eventually learned about her boyfriend. They were taken aback. To them, Michael seemed too mature, and they felt the age gap was inappropriate, fearing it could lead to negative outcomes. Lorraine and Jeffrey read their messages and recognized that their relationship was not healthy. Roxana's parents had a serious conversation with her, asked her to stop all contact with Michael. However, Roxana strongly opposed this request, telling her parents that she couldn't imagine her life without him, which alarmed them. In response, her parents took away her phone to prevent her from communicating with Michael and began to closely monitor her activities. Despite this, Roxana continued to find ways to reach out to him. Roxana's parents had a hard time reaching her, but she refused to listen. Michael started visiting their house at night, and Roxana would sneak out through the window to meet him. One night, the police discovered them in a car together and sent Roxana home. This situation had worsened, prompting Jeffrey and Lorraine to discuss taking drastic measures, as they suspected that Roxana and Michael were involved in a sexual relationship. Roxana's parents took her to meet the doctor for a checkup and their worst fears were confirmed. Outraged, they decided to hold Michael responsible for corrupting their daughter. They collected DNA evidence so they could report him to the police. However, their plan failed when the police refused to accept the report, as Roxana claimed that everything had been consensual and that she was not raped. Although the police had seen Roxana and Michael in the car earlier, and they knew that Michael was much older than her, they took no action. Roxana's parents were very worried and did not want her to get involved with Michael. So they decided to take the case to court to protect their daughter from him. After Roxana learned of this, she begged her parents not to proceed, but they were resolute, leading to a tragic outcome. Michael was aware of Roxana's parents' intentions against him, which upset him. Both he and Roxana wanted to escape to a distant place, but they lacked the financial means to do so and feared Roxana's parents would search for them. Consequently, they devised a malicious plan to eliminate the obstacle posed by Roxana's family, believing it would allow them to be happy together. At around 2 a.m. on October 17, 2014, 15-year-old Roxana entered her 12-year-old younger brother's bedroom holding a knife. She approached his bed while he was asleep, covered his mouth with her hand, and began stabbing him in the throat. The boy screamed, and Roxana left him bleeding and went to her 11-year-old sister's room. Their parents rushed to help the boy and were horrified by what they saw. They looked into Roxana's room and found her standing by her bed with the knife. Roxana was frozen in place. Their father, Jeffrey, quickly grabbed her. Meanwhile, Michael, who had been waiting outside, was on the phone texting Roxana to check on her. As the parents called 911, Roxana seized the opportunity to jump out of the window and escape to meet Michael. Doctors arrived and assisted the injured boy, who was crying and covered in blood. Thankfully, he survived and made a full recovery. The police placed Roxana and Michael on the wanted list, and they were eventually arrested in Detroit at Michael's apartment, where they were planning their wedding. Roxana was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, while Michael faced 7 charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. Turns out, Roxana and Michael devised a plan to eliminate her entire family. Roxana was supposed to kill her family members one by one, starting with her younger brother, then her sister, and finally her parents. Fortunately, the plan did not succeed. The night before the incident, Roxana and Michael were texting. During their conversation, Roxana began to panic and reconsidered her decision, realizing that these were her biological siblings, whom she had cared for in her childhood, and she loved her adoptive parents. Despite Roxana's change of heart, but Michael pressured her by saying that he was just there to make sure it happened. Under his influence, she took a knife and went to confront her younger brother. Due to Roxana being only 15 years old, there was a debate about how she should be tried. The prosecutor argued that the severity of the crime warranted treating her as an adult, and the judge concurred. Roxana was placed in a juvenile detention center but was later moved to a psychiatric clinic for treatment. Roxana's parents pleaded for leniency on her behalf. They preferred that she receive treatment in a clinic rather than face imprisonment. They held Michael responsible for the incident, claiming he manipulated Roxana and coerced her into committing these serious offenses. They believed she was unable to understand her actions due to her illness, which made her reliant on him. In court, Roxana apologized to her parents for not meeting their expectations and promised to do better. Her parents hired a skilled lawyer, spending $30,000 to help ensure their daughter remained free. However, after that, Roxana was assigned a public defender. The public defender advised her to accept a plea bargain with the prosecution to reduce her sentence, and she ultimately agreed. Roxana pleaded guilty only to assault with intent to murder and received a prison sentence of 10 to 20 years, with the possibility of parole in 2024. Roxana's parents think the sentence is unfair and too severe for their daughter, who they believe was influenced by Michael. They feel that Michael should face the harshest penalty. Lorraine, 54 years old, Roxana's mother, expressed to the press her urgent need for psychological support. She is concerned that her daughter is still at risk and that being in an adult prison could seriously damage her already vulnerable state. Lorraine also questioned how this sentence could truly help her daughter, arguing that it does not serve justice. Lorraine criticized the public defender, believing he was uninterested in protecting Roxana's interests. Instead of fighting for her, he made a deal that sent her to prison. The family was unaware that Roxana intended to make this deal. Had they known, they would have advised her against it. Lorraine is convinced that if there had been no deal, the jury would have found Roxana not guilty. Roxana's father, Jeffrey, who is 50 years old, was upset with the way the trial was conducted. He worried about Roxana's safety in prison, as she is still very young and vulnerable. Their concerns grew after Roxana threatened to harm herself, intensifying their fears about her future. The parents also blamed the police for not arresting Michael, who was found in a car with Roxana despite having an inappropriate relationship with her. They believed that if the police had taken appropriate action, Roxana's situation could have been prevented. The trial of Michael began, during which he blamed Roxana for everything. He claimed that it was her decision and plan, insisting he was not present at the crime scene and only supported her from outside. However, their correspondence contradicted his claims, showing that he was the one who directed her actions and masterminded the operation. As a result, Michael Angelo Rivera was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After listening to her parents, Roxana withdrew her guilty plea, blamed her defense attorney, and requested a new trial, but her request was denied. She is currently serving her sentence in the Women's Correctional Colony of Huron Valley. Since the attack, Roxana's siblings have undergone significant changes. They experienced severe psychological trauma and needed rehabilitation. For a long time, they were unable to sleep in their own rooms and suffered from nightmares. Thankfully, their mother reports that their lives have recently improved, and the children are now looking forward to Roxana's return home. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Wilder. Angela Wilder was born in 1985 in San Diego, California, USA, as the youngest daughter in her family. She had an older sister named Cree, and they were very close. Both of her parents were in the military, so the family often moved. This often leads to tension within their families. Eventually, Angela's parents decided to divorce while she was still in school. Angela's mother met someone new, and they moved with him to Phoenix City, Alabama, a small town with a population of 40,000. After the move, her mother left the military. The family became regular attendees of the local church, as they had always been religious. In high school, Angela met Christopher Jackson, and they quickly developed feelings for each other. They began dating, marking Angela's first love. However, the relationship was short-lived because Angela prioritized her education. She needed to move to attend the University of South Alabama. Christopher found the breakup difficult as he genuinely loved Angela, but he didn't want to stand in the way of her dreams. In 2004, Angela met a preacher's son named Daniel. At that time, she was still in university but quickly became involved in a relationship with him. Before long, Angela became pregnant, and the couple decided to marry. They had a wedding and soon welcomed a daughter. However, financial struggles and work stress took a toll on their relationship. Angela's feelings for Daniel faded quickly, and she realized he wasn't the partner she wanted for life. After 2 years of marriage, Angela decided to file for divorce and seek full custody of their daughter. After graduating from university, Angela returned to her hometown and lived in her parents' house. Her mother and sister supported her by helping take care of her daughter. During one visit to the local church, she met Richie Wilder, a former schoolmate. Richie has a hot temper and often causes trouble. Many people believe that the reason is because he was raised in an unhappy family. His father was an alcoholic who often mistreated his mother, who couldn't do anything about it. While many people avoided Richie, Angela believed she saw a different side of him and thought she could bring out his best qualities. Richie and Angela formed a close relationship and they started dating. Angela mentioned that Richie got along well with her daughter and treated her kindly. However, Angela's relatives quickly observed negative changes in her behavior at the start of her relationship with Richie. They noticed that Angela became quieter, more difficult to understand, and more stressed. Despite everyone's worry and advice to keep her distance from him, but Angela did not heed their warnings. In January 2009, Richie and Angela got married. Richie took Angela and her daughter to the family home, and they moved to the city of Minot, North Dakota. It's a small town with about 40,000 people, a very tight-knit local community, and includes armed forces facilities. There is also a military base where Richie was stationed. In 2010, Angela found out she was pregnant. During that time, she started working at a supply store on the military base. Some people close to Richie and Angela noticed issues in their relationship. Angela's co-workers noticed that Richie was often rude and aggressive towards her. He often insults Angela and makes her cry, even though she is very vulnerable. She later revealed that he was not only cruel to her but also to her daughter. It was discovered that he regularly abused the whole family but did so without leaving any marks. This abuse continued for years. The couple had 2 children, a boy and a girl. When Angela reached her breaking point, she officially reported the violence to the police. When the investigation started, all of Richie's colleagues and the military base management supported him. He convinced people that his wife, Angela, was unstable and had mental health issues. Angela lacked solid evidence of her husband's mistreatment, and the backing Richie received from the military base management helped cover up the case. Despite this, Angela was determined to end the relationship while keeping custody of their children. While trying to prove Richie was cruel, Angela herself faced accusations from him. Richie alleged that Angela had anger management issues, and he proved it thanks to the support of his colleagues. Ultimately, Angela, a mother of 2, was referred to an anger management specialist and prescribed sedatives. Friends familiar with Angela insisted she never had such issues, and no one had seen her act aggressively. They believed Richie orchestrated the situation to discredit her with the authorities. However, Angela still followed the treatment regimen, with the aim of understanding and dealing with her condition. Around 2 weeks after, Richie and Angela reconciled, but peace in their relationship was short-lived. Angela soon filed for divorce, and their marriage ended in May 2012. Richie faced a military tribunal. Despite opposition from the officers at the military base, Angela succeeded in proving the violence against her and the children. Due to uncovered family issues and deceit, Richie was dismissed from service. Angela did not want to share custody and planned to move with the children back to Alabama. This decision angered Richie. He wanted to maintain a relationship with the children, visit them regularly, and have them over on weekends. This disagreement led to frequent arguments between the ex-spouses. Richie consistently opposed the idea and even threatened Angela. During the World Cup, Angela confided her plan to her loved ones, and despite opposition, she went through with her decision and moved to another state. Besides, Richie also relocated to a nearby city within the state and began working as a junior staff member at a hospital. In this new city, he met Cynthia Becker, a kindergarten teacher. They began dating, and their relationship quickly progressed. Eventually, they got married and started a family. Despite this, Richie remained troubled by the custody arrangement of his children, as his ex-wife, Angela, had been granted full custody. He maintained contact with his son and daughter primarily through phone calls, but the disputes between them persisted. Despite everything that happened, Angela seemed genuinely happy. She had started dating Christopher Jackson again, her first boyfriend from high school. Previously, they had broken up so she could pursue her education. After many years of separation, the love between them burned stronger than ever. Angela told her family that she had finally found someone with whom she felt warmth, and they had a son. Angela and Christopher were planning their wedding, and she was pregnant again. She had no idea she would soon have to fight for her life. On the evening of November 13, 2015, Christopher went to work for his night shift at a local 24-hour Walmart. He didn't have a car, so Angela usually picked him up after his shift at 7 a.m. However, on that night, Angela stopped responding to his calls and messages. They typically stayed in touch during his shifts. But communication ended around 3 a.m. when Angela texted that she heard a noise outside and felt she was being followed. Christopher only saw the message 2 hours later because he was busy with work. Concerned, he tried calling Angela, but she didn't answer. He assumed she might have fallen asleep or gone to a clinic in the morning for pregnancy tests. But when Angela didn't arrive to pick him up as planned, Christopher began to worry then. At the time, Angela was enrolled in a nursing program at Minot University and had recently discovered she was pregnant again. Christopher thought she might have gone to the hospital if she felt unwell or if their son was sick, which might explain why she wasn't responding to his calls and messages. Even though he understood her possible situation, the strangeness didn't stop there. Normally, she would immediately call Christopher in such a case. If he didn't answer, she will at least send a text message to inform him of any problems. So, he was confused about why Angela suddenly stopped all communication, which was not like her. Christopher kept calling, but his calls always went to voicemail. Too worried, he rushed back home, then he knocked on the bedroom window where Angela might be sleeping. However, when he saw the back door, he realized something terrible might have happened that night. There were signs of a break-in, as if the door had been forcefully knocked down. Christopher looked inside and called Angela's name several times, but there was no response. He didn't enter the house, fearing something bad might be inside. Instead, he immediately called 911 to report the situation. He explained that Angela hadn't answered his phone for several hours and didn't pick him up from work as usual. He asked the dispatcher if he could go inside to find out what happened, but the dispatcher advised against it, suggesting there might be a criminal inside waiting for another victim. Christopher was instructed to wait outside for the police. He urged them to hurry because Angela was pregnant, and he was concerned for her and their unborn child's safety. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. During this time, Christopher waited outside for them. He could only enter the house once they arrived. From the outside, everything appeared normal, the furniture was in place, and everything was clean and tidy. However, Angela still did not respond to his calls. When the officers approached the main bedroom and opened the door, the reason for Angela's silence became clear. One officer turned on the light and discovered a horrifying scene. There was so much blood that the bed linen items were all mixed into a red mess. On the bed lay 30-year-old Angela, showing no signs of life. She was stabbed multiple times. During the attack, Angela's 2-year-old son was in the house. He remained silent, and no sounds came from his room. Christopher, alarmed, rushed to check on him, but thankfully, he was just sleeping and unharmed, as he was not the killer's target. The other children were with their grandmother that day. Christopher immediately accused Richie of being the one who killed Angela, having no other suspects for who could have harmed Angela so brutally. She had no other enemies. After marrying Richie, Angela had a daughter and a son, who were 10 and 4 years old at the time of the tragedy. Although the judge awarded Angela full custody, but Richie had visitation rights and to be involved in their children's lives. Richie took the kids away for the weekend and intended to contest custody so they could live with him forever. Angela opposed this due to his cruel nature, leading to constant arguments between them. Later, there is evidence that Richie may have been involved in the murder of his ex-wife, Angela. For example, Crystal, Angela's sister, informed the police that Richie had aggressively entered Angela's house after their divorce and said that if he wanted, he could reach her. However, Richie never used physical force in public, so these claims remained unproven. The forensic expert concluded that by the time Angela was found, she had been killed with over 1,000 stab wounds. She had fought desperately against the attack, as evidenced by the cuts on her hands, likely from trying to defend herself. The police quickly observed that valuables in the house were still intact, indicating that the attacker was not motivated by theft but by a desire to kill Angela. Investigating her personal life, the police noted that Angela and Richie had a hostile relationship and were frequently in conflict. Richie had been discharged from military service for violence against Angela and their children. Relatives of Angela confirmed that the relationship between her and Richie was very strained. Angela avoided interacting with Richie when he came to pick up the children, so Christopher usually handled the exchanges. Christopher detailed the issues between Angela and Richie, expressing his dislike for Richie's aggressive behavior, although he managed to avoid direct conflicts with him. After gathering all the information, the detectives focused on Richie. who became the main suspect. Richie agreed to speak with them and firmly denied any involvement in the incident. Since the evidence collected had not yet been analyzed, they had nothing to confront him with, so they continued questioning him. Richie provided an alibi, stating that he left work around 7 p.m. and went home. His new wife, Cynthia, confirmed that Richie was with her at home the entire night. However, the investigators noticed several wounds on Richie's hands and face that resembled scratches, which could be defensive wounds inflicted by Angela during a struggle. Richie claimed these injuries were from playing with a child. The detectives doubted his explanation and decided to review CCTV footage from the area, requesting the recordings. After reviewing the footage from the cameras that might have captured the criminal arriving to commit the murder, Richie's car was not seen. However, this didn't mean much as the attacker could have gone unnoticed. The police collected DNA samples from Richie for testing and obtained a warrant to search his car. The car's interior was extremely clean, except for a small red stain on the front passenger seat door. Forensic experts collected these materials for examination. Suspicions about Richie increased. He was asked to take a polygraph test. Although a polygraph is not admissible in court, detectives wanted to observe his reaction and behavior during the test. Initially, Richie agreed, but he never showed up for it. Despite his refusal, this was insufficient to arrest him or press charges, so investigators decided to look into his background more thoroughly. All the employees at the hospital where Richie works were aware of the investigation. Despite this, he was fired a few weeks after the investigation started. A complaint was filed against him for he pushing an elderly patient. Richie later justified his actions by claiming nervous tension caused by pressure from police officers. Meanwhile, detectives were gathering more evidence of Richie's involvement in Angela's murder. DNA traces were found that matched samples from the suspected killer. Richie, suggesting that he was the one Angela had fought off in her bedroom. Richie declared that maybe the recently time he picked up the kids he accidentally left a trace of DNA there. However, this explanation seemed implausible since the last meeting was with Christopher, and he and Angela had no contact with each other. The examination confirmed that the drop of blood in Richie's car belonged to Angela's. Richie claimed it might have been from when they were still together, as Angela allegedly had blood pressure issues and occasionally had nosebleeds. However, the blood appeared very fresh. His explanation seemed like attempts to mislead the investigation, revealed many contradictions in his testimony. The police finally arrested Richie for Angela's murder, but he denied all the charges. In March, the police received an unexpected confession from Richie. He mentioned that he had no criminal record and a good background, claiming he wasn't guilty of the crime. However, he was willing to talk about who was actually involved in Angela's death. According to him, during one of their meetings, Christopher proposed an unusual deal. Richie recounted that Christopher suspected Angela of cheating and was convinced she was seeing her lover while he worked night shifts. Christopher suggested catching Angela in the act, which would also give Richie leverage in a custody battle for the children. Richie agreed, and that evening, he called Christopher to pick him up from work. Richie explained that he and Christopher went to Angela's house to confront her and her lover. When they entered the bedroom, they only found Angela, who was sleeping peacefully. Despite this, Christopher unexpectedly drew a knife they had brought for self-defense and attacked her, stabbing her multiple times. Angela woke up and tried to defend herself, but she couldn't. Richie confessed that he was in shock but he unable to help her. Richie watched the attack, but was too stunned and unable to intervene. Afterward, Christopher warned him not to tell anyone, threatening to kill him if he did. Once Richie regained his senses, he checked Angela's pulse by touching her neck. Suddenly, Angela made a final attempt to fight back, grabbing him with her hands and scratching him before collapsing once more. terrified by Christopher's warning, fled the scene and remained silent until the situation directly affected him. Richie said he did not tell this story during his first meeting with the police because he was scared. He stated that Christopher kept threatening him and his family, but no one believed this claim Richie's. The police reviewed the store's surveillance footage and confirmed that Christopher was working the night shift during Angela's death. He was on Marta Street, visible to cameras from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and couldn't leave his job. Moreover, Christopher confirmed that he took a taxi home in the morning, and this information was recorded on his mobile phone. Once Richie realized how absurd his story sounded, he began telling more incredible tales. He finally claimed to have witnessed Angela being murdered by a killer wearing a black mask, allegedly hired by an enemy of Angela. He even tried to accuse some of his fellow inmates of attacking Angela, but he couldn't clearly explain the incident of that night. He claimed the killers were overwhelmed with guilt and confessed to him during a private conversation. However, all of this turned out to be fabricated. It was revealed that Richie even paid $500,000 to a prisoner to plead guilty on his behalf. When no one agreed to take the blame, Richie attempted to pay a similar amount to arrange for the murder of Christopher to keep him silent. Fortunately, his fellow inmate ignored this offer. One night, while Richie was in custody awaiting trial, correctional officers noticed him acting suspiciously. After searching his cell, they found a broom handle sharpened on one end like a spear. It was clear he was planning an escape and had made a weapon for this purpose. Fortunately, the plan was discovered in time, and the guards began to watch him more closely. As a result, he was never able to carry out any of his plans. Richie's behavior in prison was considered during his trial, and in addition to the murder charges, he faced punishment for attempting to escape. The trial for Angela Wilder's murder began in December 2016. Despite having enough evidence to convict Richie, forensic experts presented the accusations. Angela's body was found on the morning of November 14, 2015. She was lying face up on the bed, covered in blood. A drop of blood found in Richie's car matched the DNA of Angela. Additionally, DNA under her fingernails matched Richie's, providing irrefutable evidence of his guilt. Although Richie's lawyer tried his best to defend his client, the case documents provided by the prosecutor's office were too convincing. Consequently, the jury found Richie Wilder guilty of premeditated murder. A woman who knew Richie well insisted from the start that the police had made a mistake. She argued that they only focused on Richie due to past conflicts, overlooking other possibilities. She maintained that Richie couldn't be guilty because he had spent the night with her from November 13th to 14th. She believes that he is a trustworthy person who loves children and does not commit domestic violence. However, evidence clearly confirmed his guilt. Richie Wilder received a life sentence in prison without the chance of parole and an extra 5 years for trying to escape. Overnight, Angela's children lost both parents. Richie's new wife, Cynthia, who had hoped for a happy family, could no longer be with her husband. After the trial, Cynthia expressed her disbelief, considering it an injustice. She insisted that Richie was wrongly framed and imprisoned. The case might have ended there, but a friend of Cynthia's kept an eye out. Cynthia frequently talked to this friend after Richie was imprisoned, often steering the conversation towards Angela's murder and the prison situation. During one discussion, Cynthia mentioned that Angela was supposed to be shot with a gun her husband had. But he changed his mind and used a knife instead. This raised suspicions for Cynthia's friend. It seemed that Cynthia felt no pity at all, and at the same time she knew more than she was letting on about the murder. The police asked this friend of Cynthia's to let them wiretap his chat meeting next with Cynthia, and he agreed. Later, during a heartfelt conversation, he asked why Cynthia was so upset about the crime involving Angela. She clarified that it wasn't the crime itself that bothered her, but the fact that Richie was caught and imprisoned. Cynthia expressed frustration that Richie should have taken more drastic actions like cutting off Angela's fingers, burning down her house, or destroying all evidence to avoid arrest. Cynthia was also angry about a drop of blood the police found inside Richie's car. She confessed that they had worked together to clean up the traces. Cynthia often discusses the importance of committing crimes perfectly, so as to never get caught by the police. Cynthia admitted that the murder of Angela had been planned by both she and Richie for a long time. Richie did not want to share custody of the children with Angela's and saw the crime as the only solution. Cynthia helped him plan it but did not participate in the attack itself. Later, this recording was given to the police. Cynthia was arrested in 2018, and the trial began. She claimed that everything on the recording was a lie and that she was set up. According to Angela, she wanted to impress a friend because she hoped to start a relationship with him, so she thought this story would make a strong impression. Law enforcement officials stated that Cynthia was the only person who knew the situation and had the ability to prevent the murder, but she chose not to act. The prosecutor's office offered Cynthia's a plea deal for a reduced sentence of 25 years, which she declined. She believed she could avoid responsibility due to the lack of evidence apart from a confession. She maintained her innocence regarding. However, a recording revealed that Cynthia actively participated in planning and preparing for the massacre. She also assisted in disposing of evidence, overseeing the murder, and even attempted to help Richie escape from prison in 2016. Authorities documented these activities and planned to file new charges against her. Cynthia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempting to escape, resulting in a life sentence without parole, similar to Richie, who was already serving a sentence. Both Richie and Cynthia appealed their convictions, but their appeals were denied. After the trials, Angela's mother became the legal guardian of the children. The children moved to Jacksonville, Florida, to live with her in September 2017. The court initially ruled that Richie could not have contact with his children. However, this decision was later revised, allowing the children to decide on contact once they reach adulthood. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Ertman v. Elizabeth Pena. Jennifer Ertman was born on August 15, 1978, and Elizabeth Pena was born on June 21, 1977. They live in Houston, Texas, and are both high school students. They have been best friends since childhood, sharing a strong bond. Elizabeth's father later commented that Jennifer was a wonderful person, with her positive, caring, and intelligent nature. Both girls had high expectations for them from their parents. They loved fashion, enjoyed jewelry and makeup, and were active, often playing basketball together. Jennifer and Elizabeth enjoyed a vibrant teenage life filled with friends, goals, and dreams. They spent all their free time together, hanging out with the same groups and attending the same parties. On June 24, 1993, they were headed to a pool party at the home of their friend Gina, as they often did. The two girls planned to meet at Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth was 16 years old, while Jennifer was 14. Jennifer's father, Randy, drove her to Elizabeth's house around 4:45 p.m. They dressed up together in preparation for the party before making their way to Gina's. Elizabeth's mother drove the girls to the party at 8 p.m. Their curfew was 11:30 p.m. They were responsible teenagers who respected this rule and planned to be home on time that night, having promised their parents that they would not be late. However, as the evening progressed, Jennifer and Elizabeth became so engrossed in their fun that they lost track of time. By 2 a.m., they realized they would be late for curfew and hurried out of Gina's house. The girls had two ways to get home. The first option was to take their usual route, which went through a busy street. Although it was late, this was the safest choice, even though it took longer. The second option was to cut through the local park and walk along the train tracks, which would save them 10 to 15 minutes. At that time, cell phones were not common. The girls did not have phones, so they could not contact their families to let them know they were on their way home. In addition, people were generally less aware of crime at that time. The girls and their parents did not think about the dangers. People often left their doors unlocked because they trusted each other. Without considering the risks, the Elizabeth, Jennifer chose the shorter route to get home faster. This meant walking through dark park alleys and crossing the railway embankment before reaching Elizabeth's house. Unfortunately, this decision had tragic consequences. Jennifer's mother woke up around 4 a.m. and noticed that the light in her daughter's bedroom was still on, which was unusual because Jennifer always turned it off at night. Concerned, she checked Jennifer's room and found it empty, which worried her even more. To avoid causing panic, she tried calling the parents of Jennifer's best friend, Elizabeth, thinking that Jennifer might have spent the night there. Unfortunately, she couldn't reach them. Concerned about their daughter, Jennifer's parents tried to contact Gina, where the girls had stayed the night before, to see if they had stayed overnight at her house. However, they were unable to contact her either as no one answered the phone at Gina's house. They decided to start looking for the girls. First, they went to Elizabeth's house, but no one answered the door. Then Jennifer's father went to Gina's house and talked to her. He was surprised to find that the girls were not there either. Gina told him that Jennifer and Elizabeth had left her house around 2 a.m. and she had not seen them since. The man returned to Elizabeth's house and discovered that her parents had not seen her since the evening. In a state of panic, the family called 911 to report both girls missing. In response, the police immediately began searching for the two girls, as they had gone missing after dark and no one knew where they were. The idea that the girls might have run away was not considered. All their belongings and money were still at home, and they had no reason to make such a drastic choice. Both girls came from good families. The parents wasted no time. They not only searched for their daughters but also printed flyers with their photos to distribute throughout the city. Family members canvassed the area, asking anyone they met if they had seen the two girls out at night. Unfortunately, no one had noticed anything unusual for 4 days. There was a tense silence, and no progress was. The police received some tips, but these did not lead anywhere. The crucial 48-hour window had passed, despite the family's hopes for the safe return of their daughters. Police feared the worst. On the 4th day after the teenagers' disappearance, the police station received a troubling call. An anonymous caller claimed that the bodies of Jennifer and Elizabeth were in a clearing in the forest behind the park where they had taken a shortcut. The police quickly arrived on the scene and began searching the area as the exact location was unclear. They crossed a railway embankment and from a distance spotted suspicious objects in a small clearing surrounded by trees. As they approached, they were horrified to discover that the objects were two bodies, lying side by side. Both bodies were lying on their backs, naked, and had decomposed significantly due to the summer heat. The condition of the victims made identification very difficult. The ground was covered with numerous fresh footprints, indicating that several people were involved. There were signs of dragging and a struggle, but the police underestimated the brutality of the situation and the horrors the girls endured in their final moments. They reached out to the media to share the grim discovery. At that moment, Jennifer's father was giving another interview, appealing to the public for help, when he overheard the shocking news. While authorities worked to identify the bodies, the grieving father quickly drove to the park where the crime occurred. Overcome with grief, he tried to push through police lines. Believing his daughter was among the victims. Officers struggled to restrain him when he demanded to know the victim's hair color. However, officers were unable to provide any information. The bodies were badly decomposed, making identification impossible, but they feared they could be Jennifer and Elizabeth. All the evidence collected was submitted to the medical examiner's office, and the bodies were examined by forensic experts. They determined that the deceased were 18-year-old Jennifer Ertmann and 18-year-old Elizabeth Pena. The identification was made using dental records, as heat and insects had caused extensive decomposition within just 4 days. Multiple prints were found at the crime scene, and police determined that the prints belonged to several people. The exact number was difficult to determine because the prints were mixed up. A detailed analysis during the autopsy revealed that both teenagers died from strangulation. At that time, DNA testing was not commonly used, and there was no existing database for comparisons. Additionally, an anonymous witness who had helped locate the bodies appeared to have more information that could be vital for the investigation. The police tracked down the address from which the call was made and promptly went to speak with the informant to advance the investigation. The police arrived at the home of brothers Joe and Peter Cantu, finding only Joe there. He quickly confessed to being the anonymous informant who had called the police. Joe disclosed that his brother Peter and 5 of his friends had violently attacked 2 schoolgirls. The officers conducted a search of the house and discovered several pieces of jewelry that clearly belonged to females. Victims' relatives later confirmed that the jewelry belonged to Elizabeth and Jennifer. They also found traces of DNA belonging to the girls on the items. Based on Joe's information, police were able to piece together the events of the violent incident. Elizabeth and Jennifer were walking through the park after 2 a.m. when they were approached by several members of the gang. The gang ranged in age from 14 to 18, including the oldest members, Jose Medellin, Derek Sean O'Brien, Efren Perez, Venancio Medellin, and Peter Cantu, 18, along with Raul Villarreal, 17, who had just completed his gang initiation. As the 2 girls walked silently without stopping, Elizabeth was a few steps ahead of Jennifer as they headed towards their destination, just over a kilometer away. Suddenly, Jose Medellin appeared from the shadows. He tried to grab Elizabeth, but she quickly dodged and sped up. However, he was determined and caught up to her, grabbing her by the neck and dragging her towards where his friends were gathered. At that moment, Elizabeth was left alone in the dark park. Hearing Elizabeth's screams, Jennifer decided to help her. This was a grave mistake, as she was unable to escape and call the police in time. Jennifer ran after Elizabeth and fell into the hands of a dangerous group. Jennifer probably underestimated the situation and did not realize that Jose was part of a group of 6. She was caught and thrown to the ground next to Elizabeth, and then the group of criminals forced both girls to strip and attack them together for an hour. Forensic experts discovered that the schoolgirls fought back fiercely despite the terrifying situation. They scratched, bit, and kicked their attackers. Later, police found evidence of the girls' resistance, including bite marks and scratches on the assailants. Unfortunately, this bravery did not save them. After the brutal assault, the gang leader, 18-year-old Peter Cantu, decided not to let the schoolgirls go, fearing they would identify him and report him to the police. He ordered the others to kill Elizabeth and Jennifer. One gang member, Raul, forced Jennifer to kneel. Exhausted, she complied, and he and Derek placed a red belt around her neck. They strangled her with all their strength until the belt broke, and she stopped moving. Unsatisfied, they continued to strangle her with shoelaces to ensure she was dead. Elizabeth was forced to witness this horrific scene and realized her own fate was sealed. Desperate, she pleaded with her attackers to let her go, promising not to report them. However, the criminals remained unyielding. The exhausted and injured girl couldn't run far before her attackers caught her and threw her to the ground. They began kicking her, causing several broken ribs and knocked out teeth. After Peter, Jose, and Derek strangled her with shoelaces, they stepped on the throats of both girls to make sure they couldn't survive. The gang then took the jewelry and money from their bodies. After the attack, the gang members, except for Derek, went to Peter Cantu's house, where his younger brother Joe and his wife, Christina, were present. Christina noticed that the boys returned late at night with blood on their clothes. They appeared tired and nervous, as if they had just been in a fight. When she asked what had happened, the gang members claimed they were just having some fun. Yet, they did not hide their actions. Instead, they recounted the details of the incident to Joe and Christina with a sense of pride, even laughing about it. Jose remarked that if he had a gun, it would have been easier. Joe and his wife were not pleased with the story. However, they chose to handle the situation carefully to avoid escalating tensions. Instead of arguing or making accusations, they listened intently to ensure that the criminals were being truthful. After the gang members split the stolen goods and left, Joe and Christina left alone. Christina shared her anger and fear with her husband over the incident. Having been a victim of gang rape in her youth, the story had a profound impact on her. Christina convinced her husband Joe that they needed to report the criminals to prevent them from committing more crimes. Joe was initially hesitant because he did not want to betray his brother to the police. He was also worried that the rest of the gang would retaliate against them. However, Christina reassured him that he could remain anonymous when contacting the police, which would help protect their identities. On the fourth day after the girls went missing, thanks to Joe's information, the girls' bodies were discovered. Joe informed the police about the case, which confirmed his testimony. Peter took the victim's jewelry and other valuables, including a ring with the letter G that belonged to Elizabeth. In a misguided move, Jose intended to give the ring to his girlfriend, unaware of the seriousness of the situation and how inappropriate the gift was. In addition, the police found a torn red belt in the brothers' home, which matched the only weapon found near the victims' bodies, which was determined to be the murder weapon. On June 29, 1993, police arrested all 6 individuals involved in the brutal murder. When the police approached Derek, Befren attempted to flee through the back door but was quickly apprehended as he was surrounded. He was charged with double murder with aggravating circumstances. During his arrest, Derek asked if his detention was related to the 2 girls, which led the officers to confirm their initial tip was accurate. At the police station, Derek confessed that he had given Jose the red belt used to strangle Jennifer and mentioned he had kept a piece of the belt for himself. The police also discovered DNA evidence of the murdered girl in their house. Raul, who had joined the gang the night of the murder, was similarly arrested. With substantial evidence, along with the testimonies from the suspects and informants, they were all charged with double murder, rape, and torture. During the hearing, each person involved in the crime was carefully evaluated. The victim's family endured the painful details of the horrific act as they sought the maximum punishment possible under Texas law. Jennifer's father later recounted that when he arrived at the crime scene and discovered the girls' bodies, he saw Derek smile at him, wave, and then walk away. At the time, overwhelmed with panic and shock, he didn't think much of it. Only later did he realize Derek was taunting him about losing his only daughter. Everyone agreed on the guilt of the defendants. As a result, 5 out of the 6 were sentenced to death. The only one who avoided the death penalty was Venancio Medellin. At just 14 years old, he cooperated with the investigation and testified against the other perpetrators, including his brother Jose. Being a minor, Venancio was convicted differently from the others, who were tried as adults. He received a 40-year prison sentence, meaning he could be released when he turns 54. At the end of the trial, another murder surfaced that the accused might have committed. Authorities were informed about dismembered remains, implicating Derek and Efren in the unsolved murder of a girl named Patricia Lopez, who had been raped and tortured to death. Patricia's body was discovered 6 months before the massacre of Jennifer and Elizabeth, also near the forest. The nature of her murder was similar, police found that two attackers had brutally beaten, raped, and mutilated her before disposing of her body. DNA from the victim was collected and analyzed, but the investigation initially failed to identify the culprits due to a lack of matches in the database. However, upon re-examination, male DNA found at the crime scene matched Jose's. Additionally, a beer can was discovered, and Derek's fingerprint was found on it. Despite this evidence, he was never charged with Patricia's murder. Derek later gave a recorded confession, admitting he was present during Patricia's murder but claimed he was too drunk to comprehend the situation and insisted he did not participate in her torture. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him with the massacre, which was considered unnecessary given the severity of the double murder for which he had already received a death sentence. During the trial, much of the questioning focused on the culpability of Raul Villarreal, who had joined the gang that night. Raul's attorneys urged the jury not to compare him to gang leader Peter Cantu in terms of culpability. However, the defense convincingly demonstrated that he did not participate in the madness. He was, however, present at the scene of the crime and did not stop anyone or leave. This case marked a significant moment in the U.S. judicial system, as it was the first time defendants were sentenced to death for such crimes. The shocking nature of the events received extensive media coverage and instilled fear in the local community, prompting many to avoid the area. The families of Elizabeth and Jennifer attended every trial and execution of the criminals involved. Derek, one of the defendants, was executed in July 2006. He was the only one to express remorse before his execution, apologizing to the victims' families and calling it the worst mistake of his life. Jennifer's father, Randy, remained steadfast despite Derek's remorse. Many opponents of the death penalty, including the wealthy, argue that lethal injection is a cruel punishment. However, the victims' parents disagree. Randy expressed his grief after testifying about the torment his daughter endured and her tragic death. Just before Derek's execution, Randy boldly stated that he wished Derek the same pain that Jennifer had gone through. Jose Medellin execution also sparked international debate. As a Mexican citizen, Jose did not contact his consulate for protection before his trial, despite having that right under the Vienna Convention. That year, the U.S. opted out of mandatory jurisdiction, but Mexico still filed a lawsuit against the U.S. The International Court of Justice ordered a hearing to assess whether Jose's lack of consular support negatively impacted his defense. This situation received significant media attention and involved human rights organizations, which heightened its complexity. In 2005, then-President George W. Bush ordered hearings on the matter. However, the governor of Texas resisted this order and took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided that only the U.S. Congress has the authority to make decisions in such cases. In July 2005, the International Court of Justice intervened by halting Jose's execution and calling for a hearing with the consulate. Despite this, the governor of Texas insisted that they were not obligated to follow the International Court's decision. Opponents of the death penalty protested against the upcoming execution. However, the families of the victims insisted that lethal injection was appropriate for such a brutal crime. It is difficult to believe that the perpetrator was still in prison, and many wondered how the situation would resolve. He likely hoped for a pardon before his execution. On August 5, 2008, the Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal. In the moments leading up to the execution, the governor of Texas decided not to postpone it, despite requests from Mexico and Washington. Jose Medellin was executed 2 years after Derek's death. On August 17, 2010, the Peter Cantu made a final statement before his execution. Following this, the victims' parents expressed their satisfaction with the court's decision and the execution. They also hoped that the other participants in the horrific crime, who avoided lethal injection, would spend their lives in prison while awaiting their sentences. The Supreme Court enacted a law banning the execution of minors. which led to Raoul Vellier receiving a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 2029. This tragedy had a profound effect on the entire Houston community. It reminded residents of the ongoing issue of gang violence, similar to past struggles. To honor the memory of the Jennifer and Elizabeth, a memorial was established at the site of the horrific initiation, and another memorial was placed at their school. Randy believed that, regardless of their age, juvenile offenders who committed such heinous acts should never be released. Randy frequently spoke to the media, vowing to fight tirelessly to prevent the release of anyone involved in this brutal crime. He dedicated his life to this cause and remained committed to his promise. Sadly, Randy passed away from lung cancer in 2014 at the age of 61. His efforts significantly influenced the protection of victims' rights, leading to changes in legislation. Thanks to Randy's relentless advocacy, the families of the victims gained more rights in the courtroom. During hearings, Randy was open about his feelings and showed clear hostility towards criminals. His actions drew both support and criticism. Victim families were not allowed to speak in court to share their feelings. However, after this incident, the system became more lenient. In addition, it was forbidden to attend the executions of murderers. Nevertheless, Randy managed to eliminate this restriction, and it was precisely thanks to his persistence that the families of the victims were present at all the lethal injections. He believed this allowed the world to be made a little better. The remaining gang members in prison continue to request parole, hoping for eventual release. Their most recent application was denied. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jamie Bowie. On the evening of Monday, April 16, 1990, Brian Bowie was waiting for his 20-year-old younger sister, Jamie, to come home. Earlier that weekend, she had traveled to Phoenix to visit family and friends, and she was expected to be back in Los Angeles by the start of the work week. Jamie was particularly eager to return because she had her first day of work at a major Hollywood studio the following day, where she would be involved in an important new project. Brian was in their apartment, anticipating celebrating Jamie's upcoming successes. However, as time passed, she still hadn't arrived. He assumed she was just delayed on her journey and decided to go to bed since he needed to wake up early. In the middle of the night, he heard the sound of the door but thought it was Jamie coming back. Feeling exhausted, Brian didn't get up. Instead, he turned over and fell back asleep. Brian woke up in the morning to find that the sun had already risen. He quickly went to check on his sister, Jamie, but she was missing. Brian around the apartment and noticed that some items were out of place, but this didn't give him any clues about what had happened during the night or where Jamie might be now. Since there were no mobile phones at that time, he couldn't find out what had occurred. Brian remembered hearing the sound of the door opening in the middle of the night and thought Jamie had returned, changed her clothes, and left early in the morning before he woke up. However, they had an agreement that she would wake him if she came home late at night or at least in the morning when she got up. For some unknown reason, she hadn't done this. Brian felt confused and speculated that she might have left for some urgent matter. Perhaps she was dealing with car trouble or something related to her new job. Brian needed to prepare for the day, so he started doing his own thing. He left a note for Jamie and headed out. When he returned home that evening, he was terrified to find the note still there and his sister missing. It was concerning because Jamie was about to start her dream job and had been preparing for it. She was usually responsible and would not skip important events without a good reason or letting someone know. What made matters worse was the evidence that someone had been in their apartment while Brian was away. The rooms were disorganized, and items like the stereo system, a suitcase, and some valuables were gone. Brian knew Jamie would never throw things around or take valuables like that. It was clear someone else had entered their home. Scared to be alone, Brian hurried to his nearby friend's house to make a call for help. When the police arrived, Brian explained the situation over the past few days, suspecting that Jamie's disappearance was linked to a burglary. However, the officers dismissed his concerns, viewing it as a typical break-in. They noted the lack of any signs of kidnapping or a struggle, no blood or weapons present. In their view, Jamie was not in the apartment, and they thought any worries Brian had were unfounded. The police created a report about the theft and examined the house. They wanted to ensure that Jamie was not involved in the incident. They reached out to her family in Phoenix. Her relatives confirmed that Jamie had left them on time, and since then they have not seen her. The police speculated that she might have encountered problems on her journey, which was about 600 kilometers long. They thought her car might have broken down, and she would return once she resolved any issues. After this, the police left the house. However, Brian felt something was off. He decided to stay with a friend for a while because he didn't feel safe in the apartment. Brian informed their parents about everything that had happened, and they agreed with him that there were suspicious aspects to the case. They feared something bad had happened to Jamie. As a result, their mother contacted the local police in Arizona and filed a missing persons report for Jamie. The police officers quickly began their investigation. News about the disappearance Jamie's was broadcast on the radio across the state, prompting the launch of a nationwide she search. Jamie's mother provided photos and the description of what her daughter was wearing when she went missing: bright pink pants and a light top. In the meantime, Jamie's father, Joe, and Brian printed and distributed flyers featuring her photograph in both cities. They also made flyers showcasing her car, a blue 1978 Volkswagen Beetle convertible. They handed out flyers along the route Jamie was likely to pass when returning home. The efforts of her family were big, they covering hundreds of kilometers along the highway to search for Jamie and her vehicle. The journey from Phoenix to Los Angeles took at least 6 to 7 hours, and they would have traveled west along Highway 10 to cover that distance. The Jamie family decided to split up to drive along the route each day. During their journey, they visited various motels, cafes, and gas stations, speaking to hundreds of people in hopes of finding any clues about Jamie. A large search operation organized by Jamie's relatives drew significant attention from the local community, leading to rumors that she had been kidnapped and that the police were not thoroughly investigating the case. This has caused the police to investigate the case more thoroughly. Detectives eventually suspect a connection between the robbery at Brian's apartment and Jamie's disappearance, as both incidents occurred around the same time. Meanwhile, Jamie's family continues trying to find her. Jamie's mother frequently posted updates and took on the role of an investigator, questioning staff at roadside businesses. Her determination impressed even the police, as it is uncommon for a mother to be so actively involved in a large-scale search for her child. While many parents might struggle to cope in such situations, she remained focused and resolute, desperately seeking her daughter. However, it's hard to imagine the emotional pain she endured throughout this search. Meanwhile, Jamie's brother and father were also involved, doing their best to gather any information about her whereabouts. The situation became increasingly complicated, especially in some wilderness areas that are devoid of people and infrastructure, which posed a danger to Jamie's life. If search teams had found her in those places, it would have been very unfortunate. Time went by without any leads, and it seemed unlikely that Jamie would be found in the desert. However, the efforts of her family eventually paid off. Shortly after the police launched the rescue operation, several motorists who had heard about the missing girl contacted the police. They reported seeing a young woman resembling Jamie in a blue convertible Volkswagen Beetle parked by the side of the road, seemingly having car trouble. Witnesses described a couple of dark-skinned individuals who were helping the girl with her car. They stood beside her. But witnesses did not intervene and did not notice anything suspicious. It's important to mention that Jamie was a strikingly attractive person, and her distinctive car made her stand out. This caught the attention of witnesses, enabling them to provide crucial information quickly. After receiving these leads, detectives went to the location where the witnesses had seen Jamie. There, they met witnesses, who recognized her from the photo, Jamie, and confirmed what they had seen. The witnesses were able to provide investigators with detailed information about what they witnessed. They explained that while resting in a truck parking lot, they saw a girl standing by the roadside. She had exited her car and opened the hood because her engine was smoking. Shortly after, a couple arrived in a red car. The man was driving, and his wife was in the passenger seat. After starting her car again, the girl drove away, and the couple followed closely behind her until they vanished from sight. This incident occurred in the middle of a deserted highway. Initially, witnesses thought nothing of the situation. However, when they learned about the young woman's Jamie disappearance, they began to have doubts. They started to suspect that the couple who had helped the girl might actually be connected to her abduction. Meanwhile, the police intensified their search for Jamie, focusing on the section of the highway where witnesses had seen the events unfold. They concentrated on the central desert area, where there was a higher likelihood of finding someone in distress. Despite searching hundreds of kilometers of road, they found no trace of the blue convertible Jamie's. It seemed to have completely vanished. The situation was much more complex because it occurred during a time without the internet. People didn't have mobile phones, making communication difficult. There were no geotags, GPS tracking, or surveillance cameras available. The police seized their only chance by placing a large poster along the highway featuring a picture of Jamie's and her car. They requested that anyone with helpful information come forward to assist in the search for she. While many individuals quickly contacted the department, unfortunately, most of the calls were from people seeking attention without offering any valuable information. In total, they received about 200 calls, but none of the calls yielded the expected results. Hence, a lot of time is wasted in handling these useless calls. About a month after Jamie was reported missing, a witness working in an orchard contacted the police. He discovered a body in the irrigation system. The police quickly arrived at the scene and found the body of a girl in very poor condition. Her clothing closely resembled what Jamie's relatives described, including bright pink pants and a light top. However, investigators did not rush to identify her. Before waiting for the forensic examination results, the police estimated that the body had been there for about a month. During the search, they also found a spent shotgun shell at the scene, making it impossible to determine the cause of death without an autopsy. The presence of the shell suggested that the girl had been shot, indicating that the orchard was the crime scene. The forensic expert revealed during the autopsy that the victim had been shot twice. It was found that the first shot occurred while the girl was standing on the ground. A gun was aimed at her, leading her to instinctively raise her hand in defense. She likely attempted to flee, but the attacker was quicker. The shot injured her arm and struck her face and head, resulting in a fatal outcome. Following this, she fell into an irrigation channel and was shot in the back. The victim was identified as Jamie Bowie, who had been reported missing. Her body was discovered in an orchard near Indio, California. Investigators realized why Jamie had remained missing for so long. The area is very remote and sparsely populated. The only way to spot something in the irrigation ditch is to come across it directly. It isn't visible from a distance. Additionally, there are very few people around, mostly just wild animals. Everyone was shocked by what happened. Jamie was friendly, beautiful, and full of ambition. Her family and friends adored her, especially her brother, who shared a close with her. Jamie had her whole life ahead of her, so who could be so cruel as to end it? Jamie's brother, Brian, informed investigators that she had always aspired to work in Hollywood, and just days before her untimely death, she had secured a job there. Jamie had recently become a PR manager at a major studio. While the Jamie family was grieving, detectives focused on a key piece of evidence: a blue Volkswagen Beetle convertible that was last seen with Jamie. No one had spotted the car since Jamie was helped to repair it by two unidentified black individuals. The police concentrated on locating this suspicious couple, believing they might be connected to her death. Despite months of fruitless searching, but about a year and a half after Jamie's brutal murder, the case took a new turn. The police station received information about a blue convertible belonging. They confirmed it was indeed the convertible related to the investigation, as the license plates matched those on the wanted list. However, there was one strange detail: the car had been repainted black and appeared to be abandoned. The police thoroughly examined the car but found no clues inside. To identify the driver, they held a press conference to seek help from witnesses through the media. While this approach didn't always yield results, they still hope that this time someone will respond. Eventually, a witness called in, claiming to have seen his neighbor driving the car. This revelation surprised the investigators. They interviewed the witness in detail, and he provided useful information about the neighbor. The police then summoned the neighbor for questioning, which complicated matters further. He revealed that he had stolen the car several months earlier. In exchange for valuable information to aid their investigation, the detectives assured him he would not face theft charges. The man agreed and explained that after stealing the car, he discovered it had electrical issues. He then took it to a repair shop. When the mechanic asked if the car was stolen, he mentioned seeing a similar car owned by someone else with similar electrical problems. Fearing exposure, the thief decided to abandon the convertible. He repainted it black and moved it away from his home. He provided the police with the address of the repair shop, where they learned who had previously contacted the mechanic about a problematic car. The detectives tracked down the owner of the shop where the convertible was stolen. During their meeting, the owner revealed that he had purchased the convertible from a black couple who arrived in a red Volkswagen. This couple had previously assisted a girl with car repairs and then sold her vehicle, indicating they were aware of Jamie's situation. The investigators intensified their questioning of the shop owner to gather more information about the couple. He provided a crucial lead: he had a sales contract for the vehicle, dated just one day after Jamie was reported missing. The document included the seller's signature, and suddenly, the case that had been cold for over a year began to progress rapidly. The sales contract listed a man named Billy Ray Rakes. At the time of the sale, he was 45 years old and lived in the Los Angeles area with his 28-year-old wife, Hilda. Detectives looked into Billy's background and discovered he had a violent criminal history. He was notorious for having killed his own brother during a fight. His criminal activities began in the 1970s when he vandalized a police office in Compton. He had a history of stealing Quon-Zook cars, which no longer seemed coincidental. Billy was a dangerous individual capable of brutal acts, and Jamie's chance meet with him led to her tragic fate. When detectives arrived at the couple's home, they were not there, they had already fled. The police sought assistance from the media and labeled the couple, believed to be African American, as fugitives. Once this information was made public, it became apparent that the couple had more enemies than allies. The police station received a flood of calls with tips about their whereabouts and activities. It was revealed that Billy had a plane ticket to the Turks and Caicos Islands, a former British colony in the Caribbean. He was still in the city due to difficulties obtaining a passport. Authorities discovered the suspect's hiding place and, based on the tips, set up an ambush in a parking lot, capturing them as they approached their home. After the arrest, the police decision was made to separate Hilda and Billy to compare their statements and extract a confession. Hilda and Billy were taken to a citrus garden in Indio in different cars. During this time, Hilda was extremely anxious, nearing a nervous breakdown. She was also not given any information by the police, which heightened her fear. This worked in favor of the investigation, as a person in such a distressed state is more likely to divulge information. Which is exactly what happened during the interrogation. In the interrogation room, Hilda recounted the story about Jamie's disappearance, but now included more gruesome details. She claimed that they encountered Jamie on Highway 10. Jamie's car had broken down and was experiencing engine troubles. Billy offered assistance, managed to start the car, but warned Jamie that she needed to get to a service station urgently. They suggested Jamie follow they to the nearest place where her car could be repaired or to the city where she would be safe. Jamie agreed and placed her trust in the strangers, Hilda and Billy. After reaching the nearest settlement, Jamie invited the couple Hilda and Billy to dinner at a restaurant. She felt very thankful and even promised that after she received her first wages from her new job, she would pay Billy for his help. Jamie seemed to trust the couple completely, which they took advantage of. First, Billy told Hilda that he planned to steal a car from Jamie, as he usually did. Hilda agreed because she knew it was safer not to oppose him. However, things escalated. He intended to use a shotgun. Hilda had no idea that her husband was planning to kill Jamie. She later admitted that she only realized the plot involved Jamie's death while they were at the restaurant, where Jamie was treating them. When Jamie got up to go to the restroom, Billy revealed his intentions and discussed with Hilda how they would harm Jamie. After that, Jamie drove away in her car, with Hilda and Billy following her. Eventually, they stopped Jamie's car and kidnapped her. They attempted to use her bank card at an ATM 100 kilometers from Los Angeles and later went to a bank in India, but found no money in her account. Hilda initially wanted to talk Billy out of this plan, but eventually gave up as she became frightened for her own safety. In their relationship, Hilda was clearly submissive. Her husband, Billy, dominated her and he likely would not hesitate to use physical force to assert his control. According to Hilda, Billy ordered Jamie to follow him into the dangerous desert, and Jamie complied. Moments later, Hilda heard 2 gunshots. Only Billy returned to the car. Hilda wasn't sure what he had done to Jamie, but she was certain that Jamie was no longer alive. Despite her fears, she remained silent and didn't ask Billy anything. However, Billy's plans didn't end there. He intended to rob Jamie's apartment. He kept her keys and took her driver's license, which helped him discover her address. While Jamie's brother, Brian, was asleep in the apartment, Billy broke in. But he did not know about this. He was solely focused on stealing valuables. After grabbing what he needed, Billy left the apartment. If Jamie's brother had woken up during the robbery, he might have suffered the same fate as Jamie. Fortunately, he remained asleep throughout the ordeal. However, Billy did not stop there. He returned to the apartment during the day to retrieve more valuables. When the police searched the apartment he shared with Hilda, they found some of these stolen items. Additional stolen goods were found at a pawn shop in Denver, where Billy admitted they had sold them for $2,000. They were looking to make quick cash, which is why they sold the car for such a low price. During his interrogation, Billy tried to shift the blame to his wife, Hilda, for the crime, but his account contradicted all the evidence that had already been found. The police were clear about who was responsible for the brutal murder. Moreover, Billy's criminal history made it even more apparent. In the end, the prosecutor's office offered Hilda a plea bargain, requiring her to give incriminating testimony against her husband, Billy. Under state law, the penalty for his crime was death, so Hilda agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She admitted to being guilty of murder, even though she did not actually pull the trigger. Despite having the chance, she did not warn Jamie about the impending danger. As a result, Hilda received a life sentence but was eligible for parole after 25 years. During the trial, which began in 1994, Hilda testified against Billy. The prosecution faced a big challenge due to the lack of physical evidence. At that time, DNA testing was not widely available, and there were no other technologies to provide crucial evidence. Billy also sought a deal with the prosecution but was denied. Subsequently, he attempted to claim insanity to avoid responsibility for his violent actions, but this strategy failed. Billy Ray Riggs never admitted to being involved in the death of Jamie Bowie. The jury carefully reviewed the case materials before finding him guilty of premeditated murder. He faced the death penalty, which he feared greatly. The jury unanimously supported this decision because of Billy's cruel treatment of Jamie. He robbed her of her future. The verdict is crucial for Jamie's family, who are trying to get over her tragic death. They believe Jamie fell victim to her own naivety, she having trusted strangers too much, which ultimately cost her life. Hilda Riggs was released from prison in November 2014. Her husband, Billy Ray Riggs, has submitted several appeals, but all of them have been denied. He is currently on death row, waiting for his execution. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Lee Matthews. Lee Matthews was born in 1983 to Rob and Sharon Matthews. Rob was the director of a specialized IT technology company and a prominent businessman in South Africa. In 1999, he began working with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, one of the largest stock exchanges in the world, and a leading IT company in South Africa. Lee had a close relationship with both of her parents, particularly her mother. They enjoyed activities together, such as going to the gym, visiting beauty salons, and shopping. They especially enjoy scrapbooking and enjoy making and designing photo albums. Lee was a compassionate and sensitive individual. Following the tragic Columbine massacre, she joined her classmates in sending aid to the victims, showcasing her empathetic nature. During high school, Lee volunteered at an animal cruelty prevention center, further demonstrating her kindness. Friends described her as quiet and modest, often joking about her shyness and how easily she could blush. After graduating, Lee chose to pursue a career in finance, inspired by her father's work. On July 9, 2004, Lee attended classes at the university. She had just turned 21 the day before, on July 8, and celebrated with a dinner at a restaurant with her family and close friends. At the end of the meal, the entire restaurant sang happy birthday to her, which made her so embarrassed that she decided to leave the restaurant. The next day, a birthday party was planned, and after agreeing to meet friends at a club, Lee headed to the university parking lot. Unfortunately, no one saw her again after that. Around noon, Lee's father, Rob Matthews, received a call from her phone. However, it was not Lee on the line. Instead, a man claimed he had kidnapped her. He instructed Rob not to contact the police and demanded a ransom of 350,000 South African rand, approximately $20,000. The kidnapper specified a location south of Johannesburg for delivering the ransom. Rob believed the caller was serious and mentioned that he had successfully carried out similar crimes before. Rob detected a slight accent and believed the kidnapper was from the area. The kidnapper threatened to kill Lee if the ransom was not paid. At one point, the kidnapper gave the phone to Lee, and Rob heard her crying and she pleading for her father to meet the demands of the kidnapper. Then the call ended abruptly. Desperate to save their daughter, Rob and Sharon decided to comply. They brought the money to the designated location and waited for further instructions. Unfortunately, every attempt to call Lee's phone resulted in a message asking them to leave a voicemail. Her phone was turned off, leaving them cut off from both their daughter and the kidnapper and feeling completely hopeless. They chose to contact the police. A dedicated team was formed to find Lee and ensure her safe return while capturing the kidnapper. Investigators highlighted that wealthy individuals like Rob are often targeted for kidnappings in South Africa. Detectives released a photo of Lee, describing her outfit at the time of her abduction: blue jeans, a red top, and a black leather jacket. Sharon made an emotional plea to the kidnapper on national television, asking him to let Lee go and to tell them where they could find her. She expressed how much she wanted her daughter back to return to her old life, emphasizing the importance of giving her the chance to finish her studies and start a career. She begged him to bring Lee back. Friends and family were deeply worried about Lee's safe return home. Her best friend, Giselle Clemson, mentioned that they focused on searching for Lee to manage their anxiety and uncertainty. A website has been set up to collect information about the kidnapping. The Matthews family offered a reward for any information that could help locate Lee's, while investigators enlisted cell phone technology experts to try to track her phone. As days went by, Lee's parents grew increasingly desperate. They spent hours searching the streets for their daughter. In their anguish, Sharon consulted a psychic who claimed she could see something and directed police to an area outside Johannesburg. However, she later stated that she could no longer see anything. Rob and Sharon considered the possibility that the kidnapping might be linked to Rob's work activities. Detectives advised Rob to stop engaging with the media to help ease tensions. Meanwhile, there are growing concerns that the crime could spur other criminals to carry out similar kidnappings. The negotiating team observed that kidnappings are fairly common in southern Africa, occurring approximately once a month. In South Africa, such incidents often resemble a business transaction, with abductors seeking quick financial gain from their victims. While exact statistics are not released for security reasons, the number of kidnappings is reported to be quite high. On average, kidnappings in South Africa last about 21 days, with most victims eventually returning home safely after ransom payments are made. Investigators noted that the kidnapper had targeted the victim in advance, following her movements and selecting the right time to abduct her. The Matthews family remained hopeful that Lee will come back safely and believed the kidnapper would make contact regarding the ransom soon. On July 21, 2004, a street sweeper in Grasmere Square discovered the naked body of a young girl. He immediately contacted police, who identified the victim as Lee Matthews. Her body had 3 gunshot wounds and was found bound. The area was quickly sealed off by police, and over 50 officers, including forensic teams, began investigating the crime scene. The medical examiner concluded that Lee had been killed about 4 or 5 days before her body was found. On July 21, 2004, a street sweeper in Grasmere Square discovered the naked body of a young girl. He immediately contacted police, who identified the victim as Lee Matthews. Her body had 3 gunshot wounds and was found bound. The area was quickly sealed off by police. And over 50 officers, including forensic teams, began investigating the crime scene. The medical examiner concluded that Lee had been killed about 4 or 5 days before her body was found, which was a week after her family had paid part of the ransom. Soon after, speculation arose in the community that she was murdered because her family couldn't pay the full ransom amount. However, police dismissed these rumors. The entire nation of South Africa became involved in the search for information about the killer. The case, initially classified as a kidnapping, was updated to a murder investigation, and a manhunt for the perpetrator began. The South African police put together a report based on over 100 interviews and leads. Last month, investigators reached out to other kidnapping victims who had paid ransoms, asking for their help in the investigation. Recent autopsy results provided new information about the murder. Investigators suspect that Lee's body was frozen for several days before her murder scene was staged in the square, indicating she was killed elsewhere. Additionally, it was determined that different parts of Lee's body were decomposing at different rates, which suggests that some part were frozen in a large container of ice. The criminal group's actions were described as a clever calculation to mislead the police. Forensic scientists found a group of bullets near Lee's body, but later confirmed that these bullets did not match the crime scene. There were no developments in the case until early October, when a suspect was arrested. The suspect, 24 years old Donovan Moodley, was a student at the same university as Lee. Before his arrest, Donovan confessed to the murder to several friends, and one of them reported this to the police. Donovan's fingerprint matched one found on the tape used to bind Lee's hands, and his phone was tracked alongside Lee's after the kidnapping. After Donovan's arrest, more information about the case came to light. Initially, it was said that Lee's family didn't call the police until they lost contact with the kidnapper. However, this was a mistake. They actually contacted the police right away, and the police went with them to meet the kidnapper, who was hiding in Lee's father's car, Rob. Just minutes before the ransom was to be exchanged, the kidnapper unexpectedly changed the meeting location because he felt the risk of being seen by a police officer was too great, so he left the car. In July of the following year, Donovan pleaded guilty to 3 charges related to Lee's murder. He made this plea shortly before the trial was set to begin. In the Johannesburg High Court, his lawyer read out chilling statements regarding the kidnapping and murder of Lee. The lawyer stated that Donovan killed Lee because he could not find a way to free her without being followed. Donovan admitted that he had been planning to kidnap the girls for over a week, as he thought they were from wealthy families and would likely pay a ransom. He did not specifically target Lee, she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time while he was searching for a victim. Despite coming from a good family, but Donovan was motivated by greed. The defendant Donovan stated that he approached Lee in the university parking lot that night and asked her for a ride. He then pulled out a gun, forced her to lie on the floor of his car, tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and put a balaclava over her head. Donovan explained that he became worried about police checkpoints and realized he had nowhere to escape. He understood that he could not let her go without facing consequences, so he decided to kill her. He ordered her to strip naked before shooting her in the back of the head. After that, he shot her 3 more times to ensure she was dead, using special bullets designed to explode upon impact, to cause the greatest damage. After the murder, Donovan behaved as if nothing had happened. He gave a ring to his girlfriend and proposed to her, and he even participated in a volleyball tournament. He was later charged with kidnapping and murder. In court, during his confession, Donovan described his actions as disgusting. He admitted to holding her captive for several days prior to killing her. After Donovan's confession, the prosecutor was permitted to present witnesses to show that Donovan did not completely admit to all his crimes, seeking the toughest sentence possible. The prosecutor highlighted that Donovan stated he shot Lee at the location where her body was discovered, but they contended this was untrue. Forensic evidence indicated that the body had been stored in a freezer for several days before being moved to the square. The prosecution also suspected that Donovan may have had an accomplice, and he did not reveal where he had kept Lee or what he had done to her. The medical examiner observed that the condition of Lee's fingers and toes suggested that her body had been in contact with the surfaces of a refrigerator or freezer. Additionally, there were tissue marks on other parts of her body that could have been caused by being wrapped in a blanket. He pointed out that rigor mortis suggested her body had been kept cool, and only 400 milliliters of blood remained in her body. This suggested that she had been murdered and that the blood had been drained elsewhere, as no blood was found at the crime scene. Furthermore, the absence of maggots indicated that her body had not been left at the scene for long and had likely been frozen. It was revealed that Donovan had called his girlfriend near the crime scene, and his phone was found close to the location as well. There was further evidence against him, including a 9mm pistol on him, which was the same weapon used in the murder. During the trial, Lee's father described Donovan as a manipulative coward who did not deserve to live. He emphasized that Donovan's capacity to resume his normal life after the murder demonstrated his ruthlessness. Throughout the trial, Donovan displayed no emotion until his father, Stephen, was called to testify. Stephen felt proud of his son's job promotions, but that pride disappeared in light of the crime. He stated that his son had committed a brutal act and did not deserve forgiveness. Stephen mentioned that Donovan never asked for money from the family, as they were financially stable, which confused him about why his son acted the way he did. He expressed sympathy for the Lee family, saying that they were ashamed to be connected to such a brutal crime and that they took responsibility because he was their son and would always be their son. He added that they could never alleviate this pain and prayed that the Lee family could forgive his son. These words brought Donovan to tears. Donovan has faced many emotional difficulties throughout his life. In 2001, Donovan's grandfather was fatally stabbed by his uncle, who was not convicted of murder. Instead of serving time, the uncle was sent to a psychiatric hospital. The prosecution sought a life sentence for him, while Donovan's lawyer claimed that the uncle felt deep remorse for his actions and did not merit a lighter sentence. The lawyer also stated that the uncle had only pleaded guilty because of overwhelming evidence against him. In the end, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment for murder, equating to 25 years, along with an additional 15 years for kidnapping and 10 years for extortion. During sentencing, the judge described Donovan's crime as extremely brutal, stating it had destroyed his own life and devastated his family's lives. The sentence given to him was among the most severe in South Africa. Following the trial, investigators announced plans to look into whether anyone else was involved in the murder, suspecting that Donovan might have accomplice. Investigators pointed out that certain parts of the case needed more investigation because of inconsistencies. A few months after his guilty verdict, Donovan notified the Johannesburg High Court of his intention to seek a retrial, claiming he had been framed. In October 2009, he submitted documents to the Supreme Court of Appeal, arguing that he should not spend the rest of his life in prison because he had not intended to kill. He also alleged that the judge who sentenced him was biased due to the media coverage surrounding the case. In interviews, Donovan argued that the incident was manslaughter rather than murder, and he believed he deserved a lighter sentence. He described the life sentences he received as shockingly inappropriate. His new lawyer supported this view, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that the murder was premeditated. Ultimately, the court denied Donovan's motion, and his conviction was upheld. He remained silent for a while until July 2011, when he appealed to the Supreme Court for a retrial. In his appeal, he claimed that 3 drug dealers named Frank A. Lee and Jumbo had coerced him into participating in the kidnapping by threatening to harm his family, and that is the motive of crime. Donovan stated that the plan had changed, and they were going to kidnap someone else. He was supposed to wait in the car for Lee to come down the stairs. However, A. Lee followed Lee to the car and grabbed her. She was not their original target, but they decided to kidnap her when they spotted her in the university parking lot. Donovan mentioned that he was instructed to go with Frank to dispose of Lee's car near the campus. They were then to meet A. Lee and Jumbo. Frank used Lee's phone to call Rob and demanded a ransom. After the money was delivered, Donovan said he was forced to witness Jumbo shoot Lee. Donovan expressed his fear that drug dealers would kill him, and he pleaded for his life. Allegedly, Jumbo placed Donovan's clothes in his car and instructed him to dispose of a body at home, which resulted in his fingerprints being found on the tape used to bind Lee's hands. Donovan claimed he was so confused that he never reported Frank A. Lee and Jumbo to the police. He accused investigators of fabricating evidence against him and turning the media against him. Ironically, during his last appeal, Donovan confessed to the murder. His petition was denied, but he filed it again the following year. In this appeal, Donovan compared himself to Jesus Christ on the cross, portrayed himself as a victim of circumstances and complained about being denied legal assistance. He insisted that his confession was false and coerced, but this appeal was also rejected. The kidnapping and murder of Leigh Matthews has deeply saddened people all over South Africa. Sadly, the trial of Donovan did not alleviate the suffering of Leigh's parents. During the intense trial, Leigh's mother expressed that Donovan had shattered their family with his actions. She shared that every night before going to bed, they still visit Leigh's room, wishing to find her there, unharmed, smiling, safe, and at home.